Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek. Episode 20. Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
For 1/4 of a century, they have thrilled us with their adventures, amazed us with their discoveries, and inspired us with their courage. Their ship has journeyed beyond imagination. Her name has become legend. Her crew, the finest ever assembled. We have traveled beside them from one corner of the galaxy to the other. They have been our guides, our protectors, and our friends. Now you are invited to join them for one last adventure. For at the end of history lies the undiscovered country. Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
I am on a microphone. I'm saying words on a microphone.
You're definitely on the microphone.
It's making what I say seem more important to me, but not you. I'm on a microphone. This is me. I'm important now because I'm on a microphone. I'm going to listen to this later on my own and think about how great I am and how entertaining I am and how everyone wants to listen to me, and I'm going to take the world by storm and become the next big thing. But you all will disagree because you're fucking wrong.
What were you like as a kid?
You're one of those kids that would get up on the table and like stomp around and.
Would you hoot and holler?
I kind of did actually.
Did you do a lot of hooting and hollering?
I did some hooting, mostly hooting, a little bit of hollering.
Throw scissors. You ever throw scissors around?
No, but I threw a Rubik's Cube. I played with some scissors once. I was like making stabbing motions on my chair. Freaked everyone in the room out.
That always gets them.
How old were you then? 19?
That's jailing age. No, I was I don't know.
They put you in jail
11,
for
10,
that.
something like that. I was a hoot. I was a hoot for sure.
It sounds like a hoot.
But what was I like as a kid? I was pretty chill.
When did you first watch Star Trek 6?
Gosh, what year did that? Gosh.
I think it's 91.
Is it 91?
It came out in 91. I saw it in the theaters.
I'm pretty sure I saw it in theaters too.
I think it was the first Star Trek movie I saw in the theater.
I saw
Star Trek 5 on an aeroplane.
Saw it in the theater.
Aeroplane. I saw it on an aeroplane. I'm pretty sure I saw sorry, that's gross. The snorting noise. The 4 one. I think I saw Star Trek 4 in.
You saw that? In
I
the
think
theater?
I did too.
I think I saw that on an airplane as well.
I definitely didn't see it on an airplane, but I can't tell you if I saw it in the theater, but for some reason I want to think I did.
I saw it projected onto the side of an airplane.
Oh, like you were falling from the outside of the airplane while it was falling towards Earth while still moving forward enough to keep missing it.
I didn't think the fantastical scenario through well enough to provide an adequate answer.
Well, back in those days, they did project. They had like the RGB cameras. What are
they had those CRT monitors throughout this movie. Which was, the readout screens on the Enterprise and the Excelsior is all CRT. For you kids out there, that's the old style television.
I love the vibe of those sci-fi movies, and part of it is the fact that all the screens look like Atari. I think that's part of the charm of the whole thing. Is like this is what they do in the future. No, the airplanes back as they would. They would have the projectors that would have a separate red, green, blue projector,
and the light would filter out onto the screen.
Yeah,
they had an actual screen.
Yeah, they had an actual screen, and now it's just bullshit little screens on the back of the seat.
No, we just all get our own individual TVs that we ignore because we have devices.
Yeah, you can watch whatever you want to watch.
Right,
we get Wi-Fi on the airplane.
Yeah, before I was like some tall person was in front of me. I can only see part of the screen. I'm all bitter.
I saw Back to the Future on an airplane.
That's pretty cool.
I
When I
remember
was 7,
I remember being on an airplane and they made the decision.
because I'm old.
They made the decision to show. This was on the way to Hawaii.
They made the decision.
They made the decision to show
On the flight, they made the decision?
The
Was
people-
it an audible?
No, the people. No, it was planned. They didn't
It was
last
planned.
second. Nobody would.
It was like, well, you said, the way you said it sounded like you said they made the decision.
They did. They made the decision. As I finish this sentence, whoever is in charge
You'll never
of
finish
making
this
this movie made the decision to play Memphis Belle on an airplane. And if you're not familiar with Memphis Belle, it's a movie about people bombing another country.
Oh, word, that's right.
Yeah, they're on a bomber jets. Takes place in the 40s or whatever, and people are on.
I think it was something called World War II.
Yeah. I think that's something like that.
I heard tell about that.
I heard something about it.
I heard tell about something.
They talk about it on cable a lot.
Yeah.
The whole movie is about these people on a bomber plane trying to get to their spot to bomb the shit and get back. This is on a plane. They're showing on a plane. So, of course, all these planes are getting shot down. There's a scene where one plane, flies through another plane and chops the cockpit off, and all these people fall out. So, Dad's thought that a decision had to be made there to do that. Back to the Future, I did not see that on an airplane.
What about Back to Star Trek?
Back to Star Trek. Oh, yeah, back to Star Trek. Real
People
quick.
were getting cut out of the cockpits and flying out of it.
Super quick.
What are the two kinds of spectrums? There's RGB for light, but then what's the other kind?
Autism.
Back to Star Trek.
What do you mean, CYMK?
If you put RGB together, you get white or something right? Isn't that the deal?
With light, I believe it's
And then
it's
the
white.
other kind, which is just paints or something.
paint, you just get brown.
Yeah, because green is not a primary color, right?
Not for paint. No.
Not for paint.
No.
What was so funny about that?
This is a Star Trek. This is the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
It's not a primary
That's
color.
the label.
It's got
That's
a
the
little
label
bit.
on the
Okay.
website.
It's got a little bit of Star Trek.
When people
sorry.
click on this to download,
I'm sorry.
it says it in big old bright letters.
You're absolutely right.
It's Got Star Trek.
You're absolutely right.
No, but I mean,
It's got RGB.
I do like talking about various, wavelengths.
Yeah, but we do have to get to the point because people don't want to hear too much dicking around from the start, right?
Generally speaking.
Yeah, they want to watch. They want to listen about Star
Then
Trek.
we want to hear We want to hear about the movie.
to hear about the movie.
I'm tuning in to hear about this movie.
hear the movie.
I watched the movie, and now I want to hear other people, talk about
I
it.
watched you watch it. This is
If I agree with the people, I'll be heartened. If I disagree with them, I'll write angry letters. Oh,
Angry.
angry letters about you didn't consider this or that.
vaporize them. Get on a whistle.
Okay, Dan, you were saying something,
A
perhaps?
Nicholas Meyer film.
Yeah,
Go.
fuck yeah. What?
don't know.
Time After Time?
I don't know. Nicholas Meyer film.
Star Trek 2.
Okay, there we go. Time After Time. That was another one.
Oh, did he
think
do
so.
Time
Is
After
that the
Time?
one where Mel Gibson couldn't grow old?
No, that's the one with, isn't it with David Warner and Malcolm McDowell, and it's like Jack the Ripper? Or is that what am I thinking of?
It might be
Time-
something
I think that's Time After Time.
It's a song by Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah,
That is a song by
that's
Cyndi
I think that's
Lauper.
different though.
But I think there is a movie called it. Okay,
I bet they
Dan's
play that. I bet they
clicking
play
away.
that song in the movie.
I don't think so.
It's Time After Time, 1979. American Metro Color science fiction film. Reading from Wikipedia, of course. By screenwriter Nicholas Meyer, starring Malcolm McDowell, David Warner, and Mary Steenburgen.
Oh yeah,
and
Mary
then
Steenburgen.
David Warner's in this movie too.
Yeah, it's about Jack the Ripper, but it's a time traveling Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
He goes back to
Whoa.
to like kind of futuristic, present day, contemporary 1970s.
That sounds kind of cool, actually.
It's a cool movie. I recommend it. It's weird. It's a weird movie, but it's good.
What did David Warren do in Star Trek 6?
David Warner, he played
Warner, sorry.
He played Chancellor
He was the-
Chancellor
yeah,
Pickle.
Chancellor Pickle.
Oh, that guy,
Chancellor
yeah.
Gherkin.
Yeah. Okay, that's who I recognize that guy. And I
You
was
also
like,
recognize him from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. You also recognize him from Star Trek The Next Generation, Chain of Command. You also recognize him from Star
Oh.
Trek 5, playing the Federation ambassador who was kind of a drunk.
he was the Four Lights guy.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a
Oh, he said,
the
he
Four
was
Lights guy.
he was the Five Lights
Five
guy.
Lights guy.
Yeah, he was saying there's 5 lights. Picard was the Four Lights guy.
And yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
He was totally the Four Lights.
See, now we're talking about Star Trek.
Hey,
Now
kind
we're
of. We're getting there.
Now we're cooking with Star Trek.
This movie also has Kurtwood Smith as the president of the Federation.
Just a real quick FYI. I know we mentioned it briefly, but we are talking about Star Trek 6, just to clarify.
6, the Undiscovered Country.
All right.
Yeah.
Kurtwood Smith.
Who played an Efrosian in this movie. Isn't that the name of the alien race that he
The
played?
type of alien?
Type of alien?
I thought he was just a dude with a funny beard.
No,
I think
he's got alien action going on.
I think he's Efrosian. I think that's...
I thought he just had some crazy hairdo.
Nah, he's got some of them alien eyes.
he's got them big black eyes.
So Kurtwood Smith,
Inside joke.
Kurtwood Smith is big in Star Trek, right? Because he played, he was in an episode of Deep Space Nine where Odo has flashbacks to his time on Terek Nor.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Voyager, in the Year of Hell 2-parter, I think, in Voyager. He was in RoboCop.
He totally was in RoboCop.
He was in That 70s Show.
Dead Poets Society? Was he Dead Poets?
He was in Dead Poets Society. He was the dad who drove his son to suicide.
Totally.
bummer.
By being
That's
disappointed
what he
in
did
him.
in that 70s show.
That's like basically his role he was meant to play is that guy.
Yeah.
Except for this movie where he revered the intergalactic law or whatever.
This movie also has Brock Peters, who
Hell
was,
yeah.
He was in To Kill a Mockingbird.
Amazing in that.
He was the voice of Darth Vader in the radio show adaptation of Star Wars.
He's also Benjamin Sisko's father on Deep Space
that's
Nine.
right.
Oh, right.
And the character he plays in this movie was also in Star Trek 4, Admiral Cartwright.
That's right,
He was at
yeah.
Starfleet headquarters when
And
the
he wasn't-
probe was attacking.
And he was a good guy in Star Trek 4.
Yeah, and that's part of the cleverness here is that they take a guy who he's not really a bad guy. He's one of the antagonists of this film, but we already know him as a normal good guy. So it's meant to fuzzy is there a phrase like fuzzy the waters,
Fuzzy the waters.
tickle the grayscale? Is that what I'm thinking of?
Blurring the
Tickle
lines.
grayscale.
Tickle the grayscale.
Blurring the lines to me sounds better, but tickle the grayscale.
I'm
I think we
tickle
can
the
make
grayscale.
we can make that work. Anyway, yeah.
Jesse, to answer your
Wiggle
question.
the waves.
So, wiggle the waves. According to the fandom.com, the Efrosians, they were a sentient humanoid species whose homeworld was a member of the United Federation of Planets, United Stations.
I don't like this station. Change it.
Efrosian,
Where's my clicker?
they had cranial ridges and were generally seen wearing long white hair and flowing mustaches. So when at first I saw the cranial ridges, I remember as a young kid, I was like, is that a weird, like, kind of Klingon or something? But no, it's not. It's Efrosian. And he reminds me of those old kung fu movies, The Master kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then which of course Kill Bill had Pai Mei.
Yeah.
Who grabbed from those movies.
Yeah, I always just thought he was a weird looking human. It never occurred to me that he was an Efrosian.
Y'all got any weird looking humans around here?
He's got some funny looking
He's in the
sunglasses.
future, you know. He's the president.
Yeah.
President of space.
President-
He's gonna look weird.
Kim Cattrall.
Yeah, that's right.
Kim Cattrall's in here.
The maximum smug Vulcan, like they take the Vulcan. She's always smiling at
I know.
every discovery she makes. She's making a little smirk.
She
like,
smiles when Spock is all like, "Yeah, we're gonna lie to Starfleet, and we're gonna keep looking." And she's all like, "Hee."
Yeah,
She's like, I'm already doing that.
yeah. She brought out the emotion in Spock in this movie for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, this is a good kind of bookend. We do see Spock later in Unifications Part 1 and 2, and then in the 2009 and Star Trek movie and the Into Darkness. But really, I think this movie just sort of closes out his character arc because he's kind of developed to that. He's made that arc from like, I'm all super logical to actually, you know what? No, I'm accepting kind of both sides going on.
He's straight up pissed when the turn was revealed.
Yeah, and then we're gonna
that shit out of her hand. He's fucking mad.
when we'll have to get to the mind rape part at the end,
yeah.
which is a little
Yeah, that was confusing.
That was a bit,
it seemed like he was injecting some kind of personal dig when he was like,
yeah.
because in that part, I mean, I don't know if we want to wait, but in that part, he could. I don't know. You want to wait?
We'll get to that because I think there's a lot to discuss there.
Yeah. Okay.
Real quick, I just wanted to go over some of the production background. That's kind of interesting. So, I think his name was Harve Bennett. Was one of the main producers from starting, I think, Star Trek 2. He produced all the movies through Star Trek 6, I believe. He had been working after Star Trek 5. There were a bunch of problems with Star Trek 5, diminishing returns and all that. So Harve Bennett started shopping around this idea. He really wanted to do a Starfleet Academy movie. And his whole idea was is that then they could like recast all the characters as younger and basically reboot the movie series with like young hot actors or whatever. And
that was his idea after 5.
After 5, yeah.
After that.
Because 5 was kind of, for various reasons that we can discuss in a special podcast on Star Trek 5.
It should have been good, but
there were issues in the movie and outside of the movie. But
would you say Nemesis was going to be good as well, and that got fucked up, or do you think that was fucked up?
It doesn't seem like it had much chance, but who knows?
But this 5 was different.
Yeah, and 5 we just know a lot more about, or at least I know a lot more about the behind the scenes stuff with 5. But anyway, so Harv Bennett really wanted to do this idea, and his idea to introduce it was to have sort of old Kirk and Spock as bookends, and the scene, as I remember reading, was going to be like them in a cemetery or something, kind of discussing, like, you don't know who the grave is yet, right? And they're kind of discussing regrets and their lives and accomplishments.
It would be kind of like a Princess Bride kind of thing, except the old man's telling a story to Fred Savage throughout the thing.
Yeah.
But this is more...
Is it Chekhov's grave?
Well, the thing is what would happen is then you'd flash back, and the bulk of the movie would just be the flashback in Starfleet Academy, and I think it was even like Spock and Kirk don't like each other at first, which they kind of do a little in Star Trek 2009. And, and then they get into some adventure. And then I think somewhere along the lines, maybe somebody dies in the adventure. Maybe it's the first person under Kirk's command who dies. I think that might have been something like that. But regardless, at the end, they
irregardless.
Regardless,
That's not a word.
That was unnecessary.
They at the end, the movie wraps up, and it's supposed to be a nice send off for old Kirk and Spock, and a nice introduction for these kids, right? These younger actors. And I think a lot of people like this idea, in the studio and all that, because it's a good way to make more money, right? Kind of like a Next Generation thing, but a reboot, So the problem is they were doing work on this movie, and then like the plan was they want to get the movie out by the 25th anniversary, which was 1991, right? The 25th anniversary of the Star Trek phenomenon. And the problem was that they're working on this movie, and then like I forget if there was a change in management. I can't even remember exactly what the deal was, but somehow like the studio head or like some of the higher up people, whoever's in charge of these things, was like, "All right, are you going to make that Star Trek movie?" And they're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "It's going to be ready in time for the anniversary?" And they're like, "Yeah." And they're like, he was like, "What's it about?" And they're like, "It's about this Starfleet Academy thing." He's like, "What? No, I want a good old fashioned I want a good old, I don't want no new actors for the anniversary. We want a big old movie to like take them out, And so essentially Star Trek 6
they didn't want to experiment because they thought that would hurt, because the 25th anniversary is a great time to pull in all the money you can.
Yeah.
And
I think partly that, I think the personal disappointment of the person. I think they actually were like, I want to see another adventure, a good one, because 5 kind of sucked a little bit, right? The problem was that there was not very much time at this point. So by all accounts, Star Trek 6 essentially went from blank page to in the theaters in like 11 months or something. It was like a really quick writing. And that's one reason why they brought on Nicholas Meyer, because not only had he had such great success with Star Trek 2, but he had a reputation for being really efficient and not being like Kubrick and taking like 90 shots and 90 takes and all that stuff. So anyway, that's the thing. And it's funny because it's such a shortened time frame to create a Trek movie, and it's considered by so many people often the second best of all the Trek movies.
Well, it moves along, that's for sure. It doesn't really dilly-dally. There's never a point where it's ever really... Scenes don't feel stretched out. All the beats keep happening, It's like, meet up to like have this meeting. Okay, the meeting's done and we're all pissed. Oh no, sabotage. It looks like we fucked it up, and moves along. It's like, and then that's the first half, right? And then the second half is, all right, all the intrigue is kind of like put aside for now. Now we're into some fun, like, oh, we're in this kind of like crazy, mining planet underground, more aliens everywhere fighting and stuff.
Repente.
And that's, Repente. And that's when the movie just keeps clipping along with all these fun kinds of things, and then the intrigue kind of comes back a little bit, but it's more just it's more just to resolve it. So yeah, I think it moves along at a good clip, and there's not too much sort of dilly. I never at any point felt like, okay, the scene's done. I never felt like that in this movie. So.
And it's got varied locations, varied costuming, varied tones and stuff. From comedy to sort of tension to mystery.
The comedy really works.
It's great.
It never felt out of character or even cheesy. Even when it was it sometimes felt a little campy, but that's not bad.
That's the thing with the boots, and then they're like, "These are the boots," and then they go to the guy, and it's like, this guy's not wearing boots. Like,
oh yeah, right. The feet.
He's got funny alien feet.
And there was a scene. What was it when it got revealed that when they were both Spock and Kirk were hiding in the dead people place on the sick bay, and then Valeris comes up and was going to shoot him, and then Spock's all super pissed, and he's like, I don't care, you do what you want or something, go through with your plan, and then Kirk is like, I object, or whatever the line he said was.
He was like, I just assume you didn't.
Yes, that's what it was. Yeah, I just assume
you didn't.
Yeah,
I watched this movie 1,000 times when I was a young man.
Yeah, it was. Spock he goes. What you want is irrelevant, because she's like, you should shoot me, and she's like, I don't want to do that, and he goes, what you want is irrelevant, what you've chosen is at hand. And then Kirk just comes out nowhere. It's just like, I just assume you didn't, but it works. It's like really, it adds some levity to the moment, but it doesn't break the mood really,
Or like when McCoy was like, why didn't they just vaporize them? And Chekhov is all like, because of the alarm would go off, as if he knew that the whole time, because he was the chump who didn't realize.
Yeah, right. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good point. So there were some points in the movie where I felt like it was kind of it was doing the thing where there was short interchanges that would happen just to kind of recap the plot for the audience. Yeah. And that actually, now that you mention that's actually makes more sense.
Yeah, it's a joke. I mean, and a lot of that joke is the character interplay. I think it's a really in addition to, as you said, well-paced movie, I think it's well-written. I mean, the comedy parts are well-written. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. I mean, just a real quick side note, you also have to remember the cultural context that the movie was made in. It was 1991, and this is one of the most overtly political and contemporaneously political Star Trek films, right? You could argue some for the episodes might be, in the same boat, but most of the films don't go this far. This is straight up an analogy for Chernobyl, an energy production plant, has an accident, and that's, by a lot of people's accounts, is what really started to lead to the fall of the Soviet Union, because that demonstrated that they didn't have a way to handle that properly, because that's just not what their thinking was and what their economy was tied to, the Soviets. And so they're using this allegory, and at the same time, that's the plot, right? They're lifting the plot from real world events, the destruction of something that causes an environmental and economic disaster in an enemy, right? That's the plot. But then the theme overlying it is the idea of becoming old and inflexible.
Spock even makes that joke actually at the end. Yeah, where he was like, did I just make a joke? Or
he calls it a joke.
Yeah.
I remember as a kid being like, but that doesn't sound like a joke to me.
Yeah, right. But to a Vulcan,
that's how I talked as a child. Oh,
really? Because I was more like,
I remember, I knew you back then.
Patrick, you love Final Fantasy II. No, I don't. I don't love that game. That's how you sounded to me.
Dan and I met on a baseball team.
You guys had an interesting...
when we were 14.
Yeah.
And we just talked about video games, except like Dan misremembers it and thought I was like into Final Fantasy, but I wasn't.
Yeah, I remember you going like, I don't know where you got this thing where I'm into Final Fantasy 2. It's a fine game. I just don't think it's...
Yeah, I liked Final Fantasy, but it wasn't like I wasn't like into it.
Yeah,
I didn't own it.
Yeah, I know.
I liked playing it at friends' houses.
I was projecting, I think. I don't know.
But you liked it.
That theme of sort of like
looking for something in common.
The aging racist, Mm-hmm. In this case, in 91, I think the analogy for Kirk and all would probably be more the World War II generation. In other words, the honorable people who fought hard for freedoms, but then as those freedoms are then expanded upon to new people and to new philosophies and ideas, that as they get older, they are the ones that might have a little bit of difficulty adjusting to that, right? it's a pretty standard trope, but it's really interesting to play around with the character of Kirk because it makes perfect sense. You know, he's been trained for 40 years to fight the Klingons. Like, that's the enemy. And the goal was victory over the enemy. And now it's like, no, now we have to help them. So, you know, that's an interesting theme that's taken from that's appropriate for that particular time. It's still appropriate today.
So the whole idea, this was, speaking of sort of like changing the goals in mind, and, you know, Kirk was about, you know, beating them, and now it's more, I guess, like absorbing them or sort of working together. They were talking about, they're saying, are we talking about mothballing the Starfleet? I think Uhura said that or something. And I'm sure that our exploration and scientific programs would be unaffected. So they're saying keep the Federation in this exploration and all that stuff, but were they actually talking, because I'm not clear on this, were they actually talking about getting rid of their offensive military capabilities just because they made up with the Klingons?
I don't think so. I think that it's a simplification, right? I think it's a potentially unfortunate simplification for the audience because they don't want to necessarily explain that, okay, the Klingons are a fierce enemy, but there's also the Romulans, and then the Andorians can get a little weird even though they're in the Federation, and you know.
Yeah, so
and there's the Borg and
Cardassians, those Cardi spoonhead bastards.
Spoonheads.
Well, then at the dinner, Chang goes, "Tell me, Kirk, would you be willing to give up Starfleet?" And so he's kind of saying the same thing there, right? He's kind of saying, like, if everything goes as planned, are you prepared to accept that, like, you're not going to be able to do this, you know, winning Kirk thing and, you know, be warriors with me or whatever? And so that's kind of implying it too. I guess he could just say, I mean, it would have been enough for them to just say with us, but I mean, giving up that's what I wasn't clear on.
If you prompt me to think that what it must be is it is a flaw in the transition of the analogy, right? Because the analogy is the Soviet Union and the United States, the Klingons and the Federation. The problem is in the Soviet Union or United States thing, it's never a discussion about removal of the military. The discussion at the time was removal of the nuclear arsenal, right? Reagan was already bringing them down. There was always, you know, the idea was we would like to get to zero. You know, like Obama was always talking about. That's the goal. Like, maybe it'll take a long time, but ideally it would be great if nobody had nuclear weapons because it's fucked up, right? That doesn't transition into Starfleet because it's not like the Klingons and Starfleet have some sort of secret super weapon that they can get rid of. It's just they just have their battle forces. So it sort of doesn't fully make sense in the context of the Federation and Klingons.
Well, and speaking of things ending, sort of, I guess this coincides with, it begins with, at the end of the movie, right? They're talking about this is this is kind of jumping to the end, but the Enterprise has been decommissioned or whatever. They're talking about it's our last mission and all that. The only hint that they gave that the mission was going to be their last mission was Spock was talking to Valeris, saying, when he did the whole thing about where logic is the beginning of knowledge or something? Of wisdom, right.
Not the end.
Which is
a good line.
That was a good line. And it was also cool because it was sort of juxtaposed. I don't know if I used that word correctly.
Well,
but
we're about to find out.
I think you did.
Yeah, so it's with thank you, Jesse. I believe in your faith.
Sounds good so far.
This guy is
the problem is we need the next clause of the sentence.
We're gonna have to hear
because
the rest
it
of
all
the
hinges on that, because he's talking about juxtaposing Spock's scene from ...
This will be my final voyage on board this vessel as the member of your crew. Spock talks about logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. So she is now at the beginning of her voyage on board this vessel, and he is at the end. So it's sort of kind of like, you know, mentor, student, passing on the thing, but it's talking about passing the torch, and it's like logic's the beginning, she's the beginning, not the end, and I guess he's the end or whatever. So, yeah, but that's the only time they really hint that there's any retiring going on, but they don't really explain why Spock's retiring. They don't say that anyone else is retiring.
They do talk about, a couple other times, they talk about that there's 3 months left in the mission. They repeat that on a few occasions.
I think I missed that.
McCoy in particular, Kirk mentions it, that they're done in 3 months. Kirk, I think in the boardroom scene after everyone else has left when he's talking to Spock, I think that's the first time he mentions it, saying like, the crew is due to stand down in 3 months.
Yeah, he does say that.
So I think that's where everything is centered around, is this idea that, they all know that it's coming to an end. And And they might even be eager. For it.
So I guess, and that only really brings up, though, the idea that the mission's over. But I guess you could I guess that at the end of the movie, they never really specify if everyone's retiring. And I guess that after
I'm sure not everyone's retiring.
Right.
Going off and being reassigned and stuff.
Well, when they were on their 5-year mission or whatever, and they got back, I guess it was implied that, I mean, why does the ship have to be decommissioned as a result? Seems like, I mean, maybe
it doesn't. I think it's an old ship. It was already an old ship.
Got kind of fucked up, I guess.
It already got fucked up. Peace with the Klingons is moving forward at Camp Khitomer. It's sort of, you don't need that old ship. They got these new Excelsior classes. This whole thing there's a whole undercurrent of passing the torch to the next generation, which I do think is a holdover from the Starfleet Academy idea. That idea that it's important to include that message of the old have to pass on not only knowledge, but the reins of leadership. The decision making has to pass on to the younger generation.
Yeah, and they only really kind of ended up talking about that just slightly in Generations, I guess. But it wasn't it wasn't that idea at all. It was just kind of like Kirk was like, okay, here, we'll go with the ship, I'm old, okay, now.
It was more surface level.
Yeah.
Like completely literal.
So, but would they have been able to do a, whatchamahoo's, Bad Robot,
2009.
No, Bad Robot. The guy, he has that company he made Lost, and he did the Star Treks.
J.J. Abrams.
Would they have been able to do that kind of story with a sort of... Because it seems like it would have made more sense, the new story... No, but the new story was in a different, like, freaking... Time altogether. So it's just total... Yeah, okay, anyway.
They took a different path to doing a reboot.
Yeah.
Some people have suggested that maybe they should have gone back to the Starfleet Academy idea. And there's discussion, there's talk, there's rumor on the wind. Galadriel's Mirror has suggested that there may come to pass a Starfleet Academy television program, possibly a live-action Starfleet Academy television program. I don't know if there's any truth to that at all, or if it's just an idea that they're floating around. No doubt some people will hate that, some people will love it, some people will be entirely indifferent to it. I'm a wait-and-see kind of guy all the time.
A bunch of people are going to hate it.
Well, like I've said before, I want there to be lots of flavors of Star Trek, and I kind of want there to be ones I don't like that are not for me. Like maybe the Nickelodeon show, for example, that's going to be targeted more towards kids. Right. So it's going to be like, maybe I'm not going to be as into that one.
Maybe you'll be more into it because it's like more wholesome or something.
Yeah, could
maybe
be.
That works with
maybe
Star
your
Trek.
kids will be into it.
But I got the Orville for that. I was just watching some episodes of the Orville.
Well, there you go.
It fits that itch. All right, so quick quiz. English majors, neither of you. The Undiscovered Country. Do you know what that line is from and what it means?
It is from some kind of story.
Haha, this guy. Shit, man.
Well, they mentions it they mention that in the movie.
They do.
Well, I mean, they do mention the.
Is it the future? Is the Undiscovered Country?
But
it's kind of
twist.
It's like a future with like new relationships that were previously not so cool or something. There was something along that was the implementation of that.
Sounds like a 1980s rom-com slugline. There's new relationships, No, the Undiscovered Country is a line from Hamlet.
Right?
Right?
I should have said Shakespeare because there's so much Shakespeare in this.
There's so much
Hamlet.
Shakespeare in Star Trek. And
this movie is filled. This movie's filled with a hilarious amount of literary references that like go across. It's not just Shakespeare. It's like a million different books.
More than a lot of the Star Trek movies have all because like Kirk's all into literature and they always make whoever the captain is all because Picard's all into reading books, so there's like lots of stuff, but like this one, even like the Klingon dude's all into fucking Shakespeare and he's just quoting shit.
Spock is all quoting
Kirk's just like, well, who
Sherlock
is this
Holmes
guy like giving me this shit?
So it's from the to be or not to be speech in Shakespeare's Hamlet. And in Shakespeare and Hamlet, now of course it's Shakespeare, so it can be interpreted in different ways, but from the context, you're meant to understand that the undiscovered country is the afterlife. Sort of like the afterlife, the before life. It's like that place we don't know anything about. And it's meant as an analogy for the future as well, but it has that dual meaning of like the afterlife is what scares us, but like our future is heading towards that no matter what. And it's an interesting thing that Chancellor Gorkon uses. It really focuses on the future element, that kind of positive, like less about the scariness of the afterlife and more about the scariness of just the potentially positive future.
Right. The line was, "I offer a toast, the undiscovered country, the future," and that was Act 3, Scene 1 of Hamlet. Was this a joke when the Klingons were like, "You have not experienced Shakespeare until you've read it in the original Klingon"? Did they mean for that to be a joke, or did it mean like history was misremembered? I couldn't tell what the writers were going for with that.
That's why it's good writing.
It's just goofy.
People spent the last 25 years debating that.
Oh, really?
Like the old Vulcan proverb about only Nixon could go to China.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And when Spock says, an ancestor of mine once said, if you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. That's Sherlock Holmes.
Right, yeah.
And I've seen raging debates on the internet of people being like, Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character. Spock could not be related to him, even on his human side. And then other people are like, Spock is a fictional character, so why couldn't he be related to a fictional
Those
character?
arguments go on forever, and they're so tiresome after a while. It's exhausting.
And every now and then I want to like go and click reply and type, Spock is joking. Like it's kind of a joke.
Yeah.
Like it's meant as a joke. That's a Spock style joke.
He's really dry.
He's
a dry fellow.
So
dry.
So the Klingons,
dry as a Vulcan desert.
The Klingons joke was kind of dry, even though they were all laughing about it. But they were being more mirthful. But I have to think it was a joke because. But then at the same time, there's part of me that thinks that maybe they were serious.
Like I said, that's been debated because you could really argue both sides, and people do. People suggest that the Klingons, it makes sense for them to be into Shakespeare because Shakespeare is so dramatic and melodramatic and violent.
So the end speech, they bring up the undiscovered country again. The end speech, he said, it's about the future, Madam Chancellor. Some people think the future means the end of history, but we haven't run out of history just yet. Your father called the future the undiscovered country. People can be very frightened of change. And so that was pretty much, by the way, that speech kind of like convinced her. She went from wanting to like have him killed in prison to all of a sudden she's like, you know what? Fuck yeah, man.
Her character is interesting in that it's never portrayed as evil. In fact, all the Klingons, even Chang, are portrayed in a very positive, like positive might be too strong a word, but complex and nuanced. And one of the jokes that really stands out to me is, remember after they have dinner, right? And then the Klingons beam away. The senior staff leaves the transporter room, and those two assholes, that end up being the assassins, they say like, they all look alike. And the funny thing about that joke is obviously it's meant to label them as racists, right? But it's made extra hilarious because the costuming department made special care to make sure they didn't look alike. Like all those, like there's a super tall guy, and then one has like a crazy red shirt, and then there's like a bald guy.
It's the most diverse bunch of Klingons you've seen.
And that's clearly a choice they made to accentuate how the racist response to them is racist.
Because Chang had those ultimate kind of fundamental Klingon view of things, although he had it slightly perverted, maybe not, but it seems
he had like a crazy eye patch.
But yeah, he had a weird eye patch, and he
no hair.
Yeah, and he didn't have too many. He wasn't too much of. These ridges were minimal.
Yeah, they were a little bit more minimized.
Right. Yeah, and so he looked the least Klingon. I might say, I just did say.
I think you did.
I said
rewind the tape.
He is the least Klingon looking of them all, I might say.
That's close.
You get the point.
Close enough.
Until you get to like the Discovery Klingons, and then they're like,
there's some different or the TOS Klingons.
They
got no ridges at all.
Remember
a complicated set of reasons.
Remember when that one was saying Beverly Crusher looked all ugly? She's like, I forgot how ugly they looked.
Yeah, that's like a joke in The Gods Must Be Crazy. I think it really helped. My parents took me to see that, I think when I was 7 or something, to some art theater in D.C. And we saw The Gods Must Be Crazy, and I vividly remember the scene where the woman is like trying to wash her clothes or something, and I forget what his name was in the movie, but the Bushman, he sees her, and the narrator is like, he came across the ugliest woman he'd ever seen. Her skin was pale like she was sick, and her eyes were a sickly blue. And of course, the joke is that the woman is a very attractive, very white woman, and it instilled in my brain this idea that you could have different perspectives. It was like a very important thought I had as a child, that, different people would look at different people differently. The other thing I remember is that the guy in that movie kept hitting his head on the lamp that was hanging from a tree. Go find The Gods Must Be Crazy and watch it. It's a great movie.
I remember seeing, I think I saw, there were two of them. I think there were two of them.
There's four of them.
There's four of them? I saw the first two.
The last two were produced by the Chinese, because the Chinese really liked it. And I don't want to make any blanket assertions here, but I've read papers that have suggested that the Chinese liked it because it was sort of a minstrel. They made more minstrel versions of The Gods Must Be Crazy 3 and 4. You can watch them, but be prepared. They're not wonderful.
Yeah, the actor's name is N!XAU.
Nick Sao or something.
And so
I can't do it. Why would I attempt that? I'm a moron.
Because you're adventurous.
That's what we
appreciate about you.
I do want to know other people better.
It's very entrepreneurial.
He likes that undiscovered country.
He does. He was a big fan of Star Trek 6 in particular, actually.
His name was XI in the movie.
Z. That's right. I think it was Z.
Okay.
So, Coke bottle movie.
Bottle movie. Yeah, it's where the Coke bottle falls from the sky.
Now, an interesting thing
Don't know why.
General Chang is played by Christopher Plummer. Christopher Plummer is an amazing, famous actor. He's still acting. He was just in Knives Out, that came out last year, recently, right? A brilliant movie, by the way. Go check it out. So Christopher Plummer used to act with, or at least for a time, I don't know if it was one play or multiple plays, but he acted with William Shatner. And I think they were doing Shakespeare. I believe it was in Canada. They were doing Shakespeare plays, and Christopher Plummer and Shatner met each other. And I don't know if this is true, but the story goes that it was Christopher Plummer who told Shatner, who's younger than him, that told him that he needed to develop a unique and memorable cadence, because that's how you got theater jobs. He's like, because you need the audience to remember you, and that's one way they'll remember you, right? Because you're going to be wearing all sorts of different makeup and costumes and stuff like that, but they can remember if you talk funny, and it's like a method followed by Christopher Walken, by example. I think he's just from Ohio. Like my dad's from Ohio. People from Ohio don't talk like Christopher Walken, right? So Christopher Plummer and William Shatner have a pre-existing relationship, and I think that helps in their. I know they don't have a lot of direct scenes together, but there's something. There's like an extra little sparkle there between them. I don't know if that's just because they work together, but they have a similar vibe going. But I thought it was excellent. I think the acting across the board, pretty much in this movie, is excellent. I think it's some of Shatner's best work in all of the Star Trekdom.
Because this is a terrifying idea. That's my impression of Kirk. This is a terrifying idea.
Let them die.
Oh yeah, that's the scene where he asks, with the 3 months, he goes, has it occurred to you that this crew is due to stand down in 3 months? Something about king and country. And he tells Spock he should have trusted in me. He goes, you should have trusted me. And then I didn't understand that part of the scene. It was.
I think it was because I read Shatner's books, and of course, so take with a grain of salt because they're from his perspective. But he describes that in his when he filmed that scene, particularly that part where he says, Spock says, "But they'll die," and then Kirk says, "Let them die."
Yeah, that's an awesome delivery. That's like that.
It's amazing delivery.
Yeah,
but he, in his book, Shatner says that actually went on longer because he said, "Let them die," and makes that kind of angry face, but then immediately looks ashamed, right? And clearly feels bad about saying it. And he said they cut that part out. And you can tell because when they go back to Kirk, he's in a completely different position and kind of looks sad, and his hands are waving around in a weird way. So you can tell that there's a chunk out there. And I think there's probably a few little things that were removed from editing that made things look a little weird. Otherwise, overall, a very powerful scene between the two.
Yeah, it was great. So that was the scene where Spock basically tells Kirk that he volunteered for him to be the ambassador or whatever you call it. The guy who he's an emissary, right? He delivers them from one place to the other. I guess I don't know.
Emissary is like a messenger kind of thing.
Liaison.
Yeah. I guess more of a messenger, but he messenges them from there to. It's the what's it called when you like escort someone?
I think you got it. Hey, you got it. No, you got it. You got it. Escort mission.
Yes.
Escort. What's it called when you escort somebody?
Okay.
It's like you had a card on your forehead
Anyway.
and you were trying to guess the word.
By the way, Dan, these days, the more modern sensibility is to say sex worker.
Sex worker. Okay. It's sex worker is what we've settled on.
Yeah,
at this
Kirk
point?
was a sex working.
He was a sex worker
Gorkin to the Federation space. That was his assignment.
with a gherkin up his butt.
Gross.
He had a gherkin up his. No, sorry, that's rude.
He was
really
jerking.
rude. Yeah,
Jerking that gherkin.
that's inappropriate.
So,
wait. So
Kirk.
I was just saying
He
that
was kirking that girl.
that was Kirk and that gherkin.
Kirkin that gherkin. All right. Okay, listeners, we have our first T-shirt. It's gonna be a silhouette of Jesse's face, and it'll just say "Kirkin that gherkin."
I like it.
We'll sell them for like I don't know, $20 or something. We'll figure it out on our Patreon.
Someone's got to be making a thumbs up on the back or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be you.
I could be making a thumbs because it's got to have something while you walk away to make it feel more.
Can
like
it be
a shirt.
Dan holding
it's like you're
just
in the
grasping
podcast.
a pickle, like one of those big fat 7-Eleven pickles?
Hey man, I love pickles.
I do as well.
It's like what T-shirt will give you a good representation of what it's like to be in the podcast or listening to the podcast.
There you go.
And there's an outline of my face because you don't know what my face looks like.
Not yet.
Never.
Not yet.
So
I suspect I had interrupted you somewhere along the way.
it's
there.
okay. It's all good.
Not
It's
really,
really
but let's hear what you had to say.
So the point I was trying to and you kind of answered it is like that scene was probably cut up and a little awkward because that was the whole scene where Spock was telling Kirk he just volunteered him to escort Klingon and the Chancellor and all those dudes over to Earth to make the peace talks and all that stuff. And Kirk was pissed. He's like, "How can you vouch for me? Arrogant presumption." Spock was talking about negotiation. I did Jabba-Jew. And so Spock goes, "This is a historic opportunity." Kirk goes, "Don't believe them. Don't trust them." And then that's when Spock goes, "They're dying." And then, as you know, Kirk goes, "Let them die." So hence, what is he saying? He goes, "We've done this bit for King and Country. You should have trusted me." Kirk says to Spock. What does that fucking mean?
I think it means you should have come to me and asked me and trusted that I would have said yes.
Okay.
Because what Spock has done effectively is assume that Kirk would have said no. Spock didn't want to take no, so he just said, "We're going to do it."
That makes sense because as much as Kirk talks about how he like fucking hates the Klingons and like let them die and I never trusted them. There's a lot of sort of, pent up aggression, obviously. Not even pent up, really, just aggression way back.
They killed his son.
He hates Klingons. So there's that aspect of racism a lot,
But he does the mission. And that's the thing about Kirk.
Exactly.
He accepts it, so he's doing it.
And he learns at the end.
So
and that too, of
he
course.
can change his viewpoint.
Yeah, so it began with him
butterfly.
disagreeing with it, but he's telling Spock, like, in the end, right, like you said, Kirk is going to do the mission. He's going to do what Starfleet says. I mean, to a point.
Of course, it's a counterfactual because honestly, we don't know. Kirk is claiming that, but Spock knows Kirk very well. So maybe Kirk would have found a way to, given the option to weasel out of it. But now that he's forced into it, he's going to do it. Yeah.
So Kirk was pissed off because he was like, "You didn't trust that I was going to do the right thing for Starfleet or whatever." But now that he's in it, he has to, and that's the thing.
He's in it to win it.
To win it. That's the thing that makes him different, I guess, from Valeris.
Want to get paid? You gotta played. I don't know slogans for lotteries. I apologize.
That's the difference between him and Valeris. Is Valeris was under that whole thing, that old thing where people are trying to, save the world by doing a Thanos or whatever. Except, I can't say it without giving away spoilers now to Avengers.
Well, Avengers has been around for a while.
This is a spoiler to Avengers coming up.
Spoiler alert! Spoilers! Brought to you by Marvel.
Marvel spoilers. Marvel brand spoilers. get
Yeah,
some
put them on
today.
the back of your Honda.
Oh man, that'd be fucked up.
Looks like a wing that's got Spider-Man's flying on
and
it.
it just spoils movies for other drivers.
Yeah, it's a spoiler with a digital readout.
Oh,
The
man.
Titanic sinks in the end.
Oh man. Oh,
About this sled called Rosebud.
that's a fucked up idea.
It's a fucking fantastic idea.
Yeah, no, it's great. But it's
Except
fucked up.
it'll only spoil Marvel movies. That limits the market, but it fits the joke better.
Yeah, I think eventually they would release new models and sequels to different movies over time when that played itself out, maybe. Anyways, just saying the difference. So Valeris was doing the whole thing where it's like, I'm willing to kill people. I'm willing to do fucked up shit, go against my country to save my country. These are orders from, the higher command, the chain of command, trust in your country, blah, blah, blah. But the main difference is she's willing to kill to save her country and disobey direct sort of like the spirit of what the country was looking for. She's trying to create unity through segregation. Or actually not unity, but peace through segregation.
Yeah.
Unity and segregation, you can't really have unity. You can have an inner unity, whatever. So, have an inner unity through
can have an
segregation.
inner light.
You can have polyunities.
I want to see your inner unity.
Oh man, that's cool. I'm into that. You're into that. We're both into that, so why not?
What's stopping us?
I guess if you're
You know what it is?
both
Social
into it.
distancing.
Social distancing. It's made me want to find people's unity more. I miss it. But Kirk, his whole thing is he wants peace just like she does, but he's not willing to kill people in the name of. He's not willing to murder people. I should use that word, and he's going to follow up
Assassinate, yeah.
and follow up with his duty. Which is why Spock should have trusted him, because that's what he would have done. Whereas Valeris proves that she was given that.
Yeah.
The funny thing is because Spock trusted her, and she fucking disappointed him. And Kirk felt he didn't trust him, but
I like how they presented the philosophical debate, because that's what it is, right? Valeris is not presented as an evil person, right? Even like I said, even Chang is not presented as an evil person.
he's an old school. He wants to be a warrior.
They want to maintain the status quo, and so if your philosophy is to protect the status quo, well, then that's what you're going to do, and you're going to justify those actions. The problem is that the status quo is A, unsustainable, and B, generally speaking, not great for everybody. That's the reason why change occurs, one way or the other. But what I like about how they presented this whole philosophical argument between sort of the Kirk, we, like you said, we're fighting for the spirit. We'll lie to the Starfleet headquarters. We'll break the rules. We'll disobey commands, but we're doing it to further the actual spirit, right? Versus, no, we want to maintain the status quo, so we'll do evil things, fucked up things to do the status quo. That's what they left it at. They could have just as easily thrown in or centered it around making these people be like, the reason we want the status quo is because, we're the corporations that make the weapons or whatever. They didn't bring that in there. It was purely like everyone here wanted to save their respective peoples.
Yeah.
But they had different ways of going about it.
So, right, and what you were saying about, yes, Kirk and the crew and Spock and all them were willing to sort of disobey orders, but they kept the sort of the fundamental, they wouldn't disobey sort of the spirit of the order. And Valeris actually brings that up in the end, because she gets that mixed up, because she's talking to Kirk, and she's like talking to Kirk and telling him how, they killed your son. Didn't you want Gorkin to die? Let them die is what you said. Did I misinterpret you? Mm-hmm. And the thing is yes, Kirk felt that hatred and that anger, but he was following the spirit of the orders. And so he still ended up following orders. And actually, Jesse, like you were saying, at the end, he actually, by following those orders, he was forced to sort of learn, sort of approach the subject on a personal level. And he sort of came to terms with that.
You can tell when he's like some people, and like he's talking about like himself.
Yeah. And so, and then she said, to Spock, the thing she brought up to Spock was, she was basically, I think she basically brought up the idea of how Spock lied, but that was still in the spirit of following, that was of disobeying, because he was saying that the ship was like fucked up and they couldn't bring it back, or something was broken, the engine was offline, and because the engine was offline, they couldn't bring the ship back. This was like right after the whole magnetic boot thing. And so they couldn't bring that back to he was basically told what's his name, Scotty, that they couldn't come back to Earth until the ship was like, engines were fixed.
Get your ass back to Earth.
And the engines obviously weren't broken, right? And so she's like, that was a lie. But then like she uses that, it's like, Spock, you lied, because he calls her out for making a lie, and she's like, well, you lied. And it's like, it's a much different lie. It's like, yes, you could say, yes, they will lie, they will disobey orders, but it's always in the spirit of what's supposed to happen.
Those guys, they already have this reputation for this, like, all these swashbuckling adventures where they're bending the rules, and they're always doing what's supposedly right.
Yeah.
For Starfleet, and it's all in the spirit of Starfleet, but they already have this reputation for bending the rules. So this is just yet another adventure where they're
right,
continuing to do that.
And I guess it's a matter of what level of abstraction you want to say that they're bending the rules to follow the spirit, because maybe to Valeris, she was breaking the rules, but she was keeping the spirit of but she took that to a higher level.
Well,
so it's like she disobeyed at a higher level, but she was talking more to keep it some kind of philosophy, which is actually,
she's being more of an ideologue,
right? And so she's basing it more on her philosophy, which gets a little frightening, because then you start getting to, Worf referred to it as his politics are not on trial, referring to like him making racist, hateful remarks, that he was just angry. It's funny that Worf calls that politics, and I know a lot of people refer to racism as politics. It's just kind of cloaks the real meaning behind racism, that it's hatred,
Right.
Which is what he would do as a lawyer. That's why he used that term, right? To make his client look better.
Yeah, and it was the best thing.
As opposed to being like, we're not talking about whether this guy's racist or not.
Yeah.
Of course he is.
No, totally. Yeah, and so that would fit in that situation. But her basically willing to break the rules based upon her unbending philosophy, or sort of a dogma there, and that's what gets a little more frightening.
Well, first of all, it appears that she and Cartwright and others, their philosophy tends to be a little bit more utilitarian, which is sort of, they think it's which is very Vulcan, by the way. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
Yes.
Which, when you see that in, the whole point of Star Trek 2 is that that's wrong. That philosophy sounds nice, but that it can be abused, right? Because it's like the needs of the, that's like the justification for doing medical experiments on Jews in concentration camps, right? They learned stuff, but that's not, the means was not justifying what they learned, right? So she seems to have a very she's taken that utilitarian view, that pragmatic view of the actions that result in us being in a better position are the good actions. Now, one problem with that is that she doesn't know that that's true. There's a very good argument, as is demonstrated from the future history of the next generation. Everything what we learn is that actually it is better to be at peace with the Klingons. There are benefits to being at peace, and in fact being allies with the Klingons. They're good people to have as allies. Good, yeah. So that could just be wrong in the first place. But the other thing is, and I find
not like those Cardi spoon.
I know, those fucking Cardassians. Again, commenting and praising the writing in this movie, is that when he says a lie at the end, and she says a choice, she sort of undermines her own point almost by saying, no, I've chosen this. I've thought about it, and I've chosen this. And on the one hand, it's like, all right, she's making a decision, and she's claiming that right, but her choice is not as well informed as she seems to think it is, which goes back to Spock's line about logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. And that's another of the mistakes that she's made, that she's just basically saying logic says this, logic says to be utilitarian, logic says this is justified. On the other hand, I do think it's important to note, on Deep Space Nine, we see Captain Sisko participate in a very similar situation. They assassinate a Romulan senator for the purposes of tricking the Romulans into the war, for the pragmatic purpose of helping defend the Federation and sort of by extension the rest of the Alpha and Beta quadrants.
DS9 was cool like that because it made you really sort of bend your mind more towards the idea of what that whole those Black Ops part in DS9 was fucked up.
Yeah, the Section 31.
That actually there's two things about what we've just talked about that makes me think of the added scene.
Yeah, the director's cut.
The director's cut. There's
With Odo.
Odo. That was one of them from DS9.
Rene Aubergenois, God rest his soul, or not God, why would I say God rest his soul? I'm an atheist.
Well, you can say
Jesus rest his soul.
Goodness rest his soul. My goodness, rest his soul.
Look out
you
for
do
the
it.
worms.
Shove his fucking soul back into the ground so
Jesse,
it can't come out.
You can say,
Rest his soul.
watch out for them worms.
It's okay. Watch out for them worms.
It's
It's okay to say God.
what was the name
God can be whatever.
What was the name of his character? Because he's the Klingon guy, but in the director's cut, you realize
Colonel West.
Colonel West. That's right.
So the other part that's
Interesting that they have a colonel rank, and that comes
Yeah.
up every now and then in Star Trek, which sort of goes against the. Was he
Or
part
even
of like
they've got a general rank too. It's
Sometimes, yeah.
everything. I mean, everything in the Federation side is very Navy. So
Yeah, which is why it's interesting.
they
that,
were talking about moorings. They call them moorings when they dock up. They dock. They use the same words as a
Well,
boats
yeah,
do.
no,
Docking,
well, that's the
mooring.
thing is so like this is a Navy show. It's always been influenced by the Navy,
Right.
but they
But it's
occasionally
also-
pop up like a colonel because Colonel West is in the Starfleet. But the thing is he's dressed up as a Klingon, and in the theatrical cut, which is what we watched. You see the Klingon attempt the assassination at the end at Kittimer, and then it's just that's it. It's a Klingon. He dies. But in the director's cut,
There's two scenes. And I mean, there's maybe
Yeah,
a
there
couple
are-
scenes,
there are a
but-
couple extra
But there's
scenes.
two scenes that relate to that.
yeah, but in the director's cut, they realize in fact, you can see it in the theatrical cut when they go up to look at his body.
Yeah.
There's first of all, there's red blood. Second of all, there's some weird flappiness around his chin
Yeah,
and
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And that's because they cut right before they look at it, and then they peel the mask off, and it's
some
Rene
glass.
Aubergenois with a porn mustache.
Yeah. So
And it's Colonel West, which we've seen earlier in the director's cut.
So it's interesting. That cut works strangely too, because if you watch the director's cut, it's just that guy, the commander in chief, who was also in the first scene with Colonel West. The commander in chief guy, he comes down and it's just him. Then in the director's cut, it goes back, and then suddenly you see a Klingon hand, and he's going like, "This isn't Klingon blood," blah blah blah. And then it goes out, and you see suddenly you got the commander in chief like in that first scene, but Worf appears too, like right next to him, and you're just like, where did Worf come from? He just it's like the scene is.
And was it Colonel Worf? I think that was his rank. I can't remember in the courtroom scene. It's like Worf. It's like our Worf. It's TNG Worf's grandfather, right? And it's Colonel Worf.
Is that
It's supposed to be an ancestor.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's supposed to
that
be
makes
his dad's dad.
I never knew that because I was just wondering how that time worked out, and I guess
Well, this movie does a really. I mean, Next Generation by 1991 was already an extremely popular show, and they do so many tie-ins with the Next Generation. First of all, the dining room area that is just the TNG ready room. That
yeah,
they've
I was
redone.
actually noticing that when Scotty was sitting there and he notices the poorly hidden blood
I know, like they're really
uniforms.
poorly hidden.
I'm gonna put it in this vent right here. It's gonna all clatter about,
Although probably they hid it there after they were dead. Maybe that's what it was. It was like you wanted them to get found at that point.
Yeah, because they found the bodies at the same time. Scotty's like, "Look at these blood-soaked uniforms." They open the door, and then there's the dead bodies.
Yeah,
it all
it's like a
happened at the same
sitcom.
time. It's like, whoa, okay.
But the other thing is that this peace conference is taking place at Kittimer, and Kittimer was referenced in the Next Generation of where the peace accords were signed for the Klingon. When they made peace with the Klingons, it's also where Worf's parents were killed at Kittimer, where by a Romulan attack, and that's when Worf was taken in by the Rozhenkos. Rozhenko was a lieutenant or something on some spaceship. Some spaceship up there.
Oh, he was like a chief petty officer.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. He was not.
He
Yeah,
was enlisted.
nah, you're absolutely right. I think he was probably just a petty officer at that time. And he found Worf after the attack because I guess his starship, I think it was the Intrepid. He was on the Intrepid. and they
found Worf, and
they
there's
got there
gonna
too.
be some.
But anyway, that's just a
trouble.
great connection, and it kind of makes sense, that there would be this connection. I just like that they did that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I did.
totally.
I did too. So I never got back to the second thing that reminded me of Colonel West. First was that
Thing
it was-
number two.
First, it was Rene Aubergenois from
Aubergenois?
DS9. The second one is he was talking about his plan. I believe it was him and not the commander-in-chief guy, who was the other guy who found the body on the ground. He was talking about the plan. He was like, we're going to take a task force in. We're going to rescue Kirk, and we're going to rescue Bones and all, McCoy or whatever. And they were talking about there will be some lives lost. We will lose them. And so they're talking about losing lives in order to save some lives.
Yeah.
But that goes back to the idea of like,
That's like hero style.
that's like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Well, that's kind of dicey. That's
It's also a political thing.
That's
It's like-
fuzzing. That's fuzzing the waters, as you say, a little bit, because
Yeah, no, what was it like? Ticking the white paste.
ticking the white.
Wiggling the waves.
What did I say? Tickling the grayscale.
Oh yeah,
it's
tickling the
great,
grayscale.
flapping
Yeah,
the
you
cheeks.
said that.
But it was because on the one hand, it's on the one. Jesus. Jeez, I mean, Jeezo flip.
It's almost Easter.
So, and God damn it.
Get your eggs ready.
Okay.
I know these are supposed to be evergreen, but it's a little hint.
Okay,
little hint out there,
I'm just
folks.
trying
We're
to
recording a
find-
couple
okay,
days
we're-
before Easter.
It's Good Friday.
We're just trying to do this again.
Jesus is going in the hole. Did he go in the hole
I
on
don't
Ash?
know.
No, he
I
went on
don't
the hole on
fucking care.
Wednesday.
He
Right?
Why are we talking? Jesus. How,
I think
okay,
it was
this is
today.
why one point that I make gets stretched out to 15 minutes and no one remembers
Yeah, that's
how
how
it
we
began.
get 2.5 hours of
It's got a
content.
2.5
No,
hour.
no.
Gotta
'cause-
get that content
No,
out for the
because
users.
then I have to do that thing where I have to recap what I said before. When this was going to take me about a minute to say, I have to constantly recap what I said because of
He
this.
fixes all that.
It's like
in
a
the
fucking
ending.
reality
Fixes
show.
it.
No, this is too great. I don't know this. This is fantastic. This is good content, guys.
Okay, it's content. It's not a lot of content, but it is.
You're not content with the content. I can tell. Please continue.
On the one hand, it's talking about outweighing the needs of the many. So you're saving Kirk and Bones at the expense of losing probably, let's say, 100 lives or however they calculated, right? On the one hand, that's not needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It's not on the surface level because obviously you're killing 100 people, saving 2. But on the other hand, it is doing needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few because by saving these 2 guys, potentially they're such legends, you're not doing it just you might be doing it just to sort of be like, they deserve this respect. Or you could be doing it because they're going to do some amazing, they've got more amazing shit left in them that will ultimately save more people in the end. I don't know, but that's what you were talking about. Needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few that Valeris was talking about.
Well, and also the rescue of Kirk and McCoy you can think of is it's a political decision. It's not a military decision. It's not even a moral decision that much. A little bit in the sense that you want to show the rest. It's not just that you want to help those particular people. You do want to show the rest of your people that these are the lengths you will go to right a wrong because they have been wronged. Like that adds to the balance sheet why it might be able to cost more lives. But also fundamentally, it's a political decision, and they take the other decision. Right, the president takes the decision not to attempt a rescue because the peace is more important in this case.
Right, so I guess Colonel West was taking more of an approach of like, don't fuck with us, basically. Like, you're not going to get our guys, don't fuck with us. You know?
That would be a political statement to say, like, we're getting those motherfuckers back.
Yeah, don't, and yeah, and they even talk about, like, there's the whole Admiral Cartwright and him, and they're all talking about fucking the Klingons up, kicking them when they're down, basically like curb stomping them.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's the
the
idea.
strategic idea. They're
And
like, haha, that's funny. Let's kill them.
Yeah, and so on the one hand, you might think, oh, well, they should save Kirk and do whatever, because there's some episodes where they are like, we're gonna save the captain no matter what. We don't give a shit if we disobey Star Trek. If we disobey Star Trek.
Heaven forbid you disobey Star Trek.
And
He's
we're
the
gonna,
star of the fucking show. We gotta save him.
Yeah, so on the one hand, you could say, oh, that's a bummer. They should be doing that. But on the other hand, which is what Colonel West wants to do, but on the other hand, the president has the more noble sort of idea of, these are the articles of intergalactic law or whatever, Article 184, so we have to obey this for...
I remember, did you get a bad feeling in your stomach? Not a bad feeling. Did you just feel upset about the current world we live in, where in 2020, this movie came out in 1991, and there's like a zoom-in close-up of the president of the Federation of Planets saying, this president is not above the law.
Yeah.
And make the decision not to save Captain fucking Kirk.
Yeah.
Like, that's how honorable this guy is. And it didn't even seem like this guy they weren't even making him out to be some super honorable guy. Like, they weren't making him out to be a fucking Abraham Lincoln Gorkin or President Obama. They were making him out to be a fairly pragmatic guy, but even he was like, well, we can't do it.
Yeah, you got to wonder if something like that was added in a movie, now or something, people would be like, oh, I see what they're trying to do there.
Probably.
Why are you so obvious about
Hollywood. Hollywood's always trying to do that.
Yeah, always trying to make political commentary.
First it was fake news, now it's fake movies.
Yeah. But no, this was a long time ago, back in the age of Jinko jeans or before.
Wait, is that a thing?
What?
Jinko jeans were a thing.
Commander Salamander?
What?
Oshkosh Bagosh?
George Bush.
When was this
Not
movie
gonna
made?
do it. 1991. We released at the end of 1991.
This was around when Kurt Cobain died, right?
It was
No.
prior to that.
It was prior to that.
Kurt
yeah.
Cobain was 93, I think.
That's what I said.
Yes.
Go back.
You know what? You know what I have to say to that, Dan?
Okay.
It's a great movie. It's no fried green tomatoes.
Yeah. Or it's no Golden Girls.
Golden Girls is good, but that's not a movie.
So yeah, the Klingons.
It should have been, though.
There was another one that stuck out is when Praxis blew up and there's
Practice blew up.
they said they're everyone's a little punchy tonight. I don't know.
No.
I don't know where this punchiness is coming from.
I'm gonna punch you up the Unity.
So Praxis
Punch you in your unity.
more like
Your inner
poop-unity.
unity.
So this what you were talking about president's not above the law. It's kind of poignant or whatever. It hits home. The reason the Klingons, they go their large military budget. With their large military budget, the economy does not have the resources to combat this catastrophe.
Yeah.
So they got so
That's
much
a classic scenario.
Yeah, there's so much money. Yeah, I guess that's timeless, really. You know that.
That goes to the Soviet Union model too, which is the Soviet Union. Their production. So much of their production was targeted towards, girding their defense mechanisms, both their buffer countries and the military and the
'Cause they were afraid of
nuclear
America.
weapons. Yeah.
So speaking of the Soviet Union again, I didn't quite get this line, but I think maybe it has something to do with that. When I was talking about how at dinner time, Chang was like, would you be willing to give up Starfleet? And then Spock sort of interrupts and he goes, I believe the captain feels like Starfleet's mission has always been one of peace. And I guess that's trying to say, like, I guess the disbandment of Starfleet, which not's really going to happen. But that idea they were talking about, that was the goal. Even though they don't get to battle it over, it's kind of like dies away. But
it's the nuclear weapons analogy.
Yeah.
Again. It kind of doesn't work in the Starfleet
right.
context.
So actually, there's two parts that a little confused me. Kirk answers with, "Far be it from me to dispute my first officer, but Starfleet has always been," and then it kind of cuts off. And
Yeah.
first of all, like, was Kirk about to disagree with Spock and say, no, we would have wanted to fuck you up or something?
No. Spock is giving the diplomatic platitude of like, no, we despite all these things, despite all these weapons and warships, we really mostly just want to explore and be happy, which I think he's sincere about. But Kirk is about to make the very valid point, and again, the United States, that actually a lot of what the Federation does is project power and defend itself from all these wily, crazy, Klingons and Romulans and Cardassians.
So this
Canard drinking spoonheads.
So, like, the next line
It
is
will eventually be totally inappropriate for that term will go
out of style at some point. So,
I try to be woke.
I hope so. Yeah.
I try to be woke, except
So-
when it comes to Cardassians.
so after Kirk
They're
said,
not so bad.
So when Kirk says that, and
I like Damar.
and Chang interrupts him, and he says, Captain, there's no need to mince words. And then Spock, like, sort of grimaces. He's just kind of like, uh-oh, what's going to happen? And then then he finishes up, Chang goes, in space, all warriors are cold warriors.
Yep.
Now, like, that can
Cold
only mean
War.
Cold War,
Yeah.
right? But at the same time, I don't really, I guess it was some kind of, was it a pun?
It's a double.
It's a pun.
It's a pun.
It's a pun.
Yeah. Because
It's a pun. What I like about Nicholas Meyer, and I wish more writers would do this in sci-fi, is don't worry about it. Just give the most direct analogies that will work for the audience. That's why, for example, the Spock line to Kirk earlier, only Nixon could go to China. In one very brief line, it conveys to the audience through a cultural trope the idea that the reason you are the person to go is because you hate and don't trust the Klingons. And that if you are on the side of peace, they will trust you more than me or this pansy-ass Federation president and his goofy hair, because those people, of course, are going to say they're for peace because they're always like, peace, peace, peace. But if you are willing to do that, then that indicates to them like, oh, even those dudes are like that. The Nixon goes to China thing is that example. Nixon was a huge critic and foe and argued for really reigning in China. So when Nixon became the president to go over to China and try to normalize relationship with them, they could take that more seriously than, say, a Jimmy Carter, for example, or an LBJ, because they were like, okay, if he's going to do this, then he means business.
This guy expanded the war into Cambodia.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a three-way kind of thing. There was Cold War. In space, it's cold in space, I guess.
It sure is.
And then I guess Cold Warrior's kind of saying like, yeah, we're badass cold motherfuckers or something. I don't know.
Well, so a couple things about so real quick, I want to just note before we go past this too much. I really liked the whole scene where Kirk invites them to dinner.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it seems like that's a surprise to most people.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because it seemed like it was a surprise.
I think that is Kirk. Kirk is so reluctant up to that point. He doesn't want to deal with any of this shit. He's pissed off at Spock. He comes onto the bridge and everyone's like, what's he going to do? He's like delaying, Spock is all like, yeah, they're waiting for the signal. And then he busts out, because he's fucking Captain Kirk, so he busts out with, well, this is the mission, so I'm going to do it right. I want to invite these motherfuckers to dinner. But the best part about that whole scene is he invites them to dinner, Gorkin says yes, everyone looks a little surprised, and when Gorkin says yes, they do a weirdly long shot of Kirk just looking fucking dejected. Like he really is sad that they accepted the invitation, because he's like, now I have to fucking do this. And that's mirrored by at the end of the dinner, when the Klingons have left, Spock looks dejected because the dinner went kind of so poorly. Yeah. Right?
Well,
so they're on either end of it, and they're both disappointed in what's happening and that what's out of their control. Right?
Yeah. Spock was almost like he was almost like a disappointed parent or something after all that was over. Yeah, so I was wondering, I guess it's standard. They weren't surprised because Kirk did because it's weird to invite these people over. It would have been weird to invite them to dinner. In fact, that would have been probably
that's the appropriate diplomatic thing.
Appropriate, to do. Like not required, but the appropriate diplomatic thing to do. But they would have thought Kirk would have been like, F that S.
I mean, I'm not gonna eat no gok.
I mean, no gok. That one Klingon,
those gok eating bastards.
They were eating some kind of noodly looking thing, like it was gok at one point.
Wasn't one of the Klingons like all like digging it? He was all like kind of like, because some of them were looking at the food all kind of.
They were like wondering, what's this napkin thing? They didn't. They were like,
that was great.
Yeah, they were like, what is all this?
They were like unraveling the napkin.
Yeah, right. But one Klingon was stuffing his face with that pasta stuff, and that that Romulan ale. It didn't look that. It was just kind of some blue looking beer.
Like
it's an old joke. I mean, that goes back to Star Trek II, I think was the first reference to Romulan ale. But the idea is that it's illegal. And the Romulan ale is meant to be like Cuban cigars. Mm-hmm. So this is all Cold War. So much of Star Trek is influenced by Cold War. The TOS was a Cold War show, right? But the Romulan ale is basically Cuban cigars. It's good, and you're not supposed to have it, but it's not like poison or anything, right? It's like it's just strong liquor or something, right?
They've got a stash stored away in the ship. It's not replicated. Yeah.
You probably can't even replicate that shit.
You could, it's just not as good.
Yeah, it won't be as good.
Well, I thought it'd be illegal. I wonder if the replicator, when we have self-driving cars,
the replicator will be like, I cannot make that.
Does not compute.
I'm surprised they don't already enforce speed limits. But anyways, so it was all blue. I wonder if it was blue.
Can they replicate like a joint?
They can. The only thing
Snake leaf?
The only thing we know of that they can't replicate is latinum, which is why it's valuable.
Exactly.
It is introduced in DS9.
Word up.
And they press it in gold plate because, as discussed before, it's liquid. But that blue stuff, it's illegal because that whole thing. But do you think that getting drunk feels the same on? Do you think it's like?
I think it's alcohol.
It's just alcohol.
It's just a molecule in space.
Alcohol. Yeah, it's just space alcohol. It's probably the same, right?
Yeah, I mean we're all made from the same molecules.
It's all
presumably.
Same. Yeah, but I mean, they gotta have some weird drugs in space, right?
In space, no one can tell you're high.
Yeah,
like hurtling through the space station, being like, "Yo, what's with that guy?"
There's a guy on the screen and he's talking to me. What's he saying?
Hey, the blood's purple. You got some purple blood.
Purple. You got some pink bismuth
It's
flowing
all
through
coming
you.
out in bubbles. What's he doing?
I liked that when Kirk was giving his little log about how shitty the evening went, he was like, our manners weren't exactly Emily Post, which doesn't even make any sense now. It was such a contemporaneous reference. I think it was not even a contemporary. I think it was an old reference back then about that.
It's a mid 20th century.
Yeah, she wrote articles about like the right way to put your forks and shit.
Well, okay, looking back at that dinner, it was really only a slight instigation on the Klingons' part. The only real fucked up thing was when Chang goes, we need breathing room, and then
We need breathing room.
Kirk's like, Earth, Hitler,
Wir
1938.
brauchen Lebensraum.
Yeah.
Lebensraum.
So
And everybody's like, whoa, that's fucked.
that was the only real fucked up thing that happened. There was some
And it's really funny. It's another example of great humor.
Yeah.
Hitler,
Yeah.
1938.
That's very funny. So
Well, yeah, okay. But it's a joke.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to make that come off as judgmental as I did. I didn't. I just didn't know how to respond to it. I just didn't know how to.
Funny.
I just didn't.
This is not funny to us or to the German people.
So yeah. So that was the only fucked up thing he said. There was really nothing else. It was a
He
little
mentioned it
uncomfortable.
once, and I think he got away with it.
It was
Like they were talking about how terribly the meal went, but it didn't go that bad.
yeah.
except
Are
for
you
that.
forgetting the part when Chekhov is all like, we think everyone's has a sovereign right to inalienable human rights, and
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like, inalienable. Do you hear?
Yeah.
I loved that they had this character straight up say the word racist.
Yeah.
They did not leave it to subtext. She just straight up says like human rights. The very word is racist because it
Homo
is.
sapiens only club.
Yeah,
right.
Present company included or
Yeah.
excluded.
No, it is. Yeah, it's trying to be, woke, as they say, but not real. It's that idea of thinking that you're above all that, and you're
But
like,
in 1991,
It's
they
a
didn't have woke.
1991.
they didn't have.
They had
that's-
woke.
No, they didn't. That's,
Woke.
that's not what that song was about. That song wasn't about that. So
That's pretty great.
that's why I was trying to figure out what word to use, though, because they didn't. So, but it's the idea of someone thinking that they're, above all the racism and the hatred, but they don't even realize that their terminology that's ingrained into them has a perspective that, in this case, human perspective. I was going to say anthropomorphic, but what does anthro means?
It means human,
It
yeah.
means human. So I was wondering, is that limited to humans versus Vulcans? I guess Vulcanthropomorphic.
It's about institutionalized racism.
Yeah.
This scene in particular, but there's this theme comes up again, which is like the structure of it. The structure of the Federation, the structure of Starfleet is like Klingons are bad. They are bad people. They are the enemy. And that even if you are the woke captain of the Enterprise and pretty good on most of these matters, you are
and
susceptible
he's not
to
all that woke.
yeah,
No.
but he's
No,
susceptible.
he thinks he is, though.
But Kirk has saved plenty of races and done all sorts of sacrifice and blah 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 blah. But it is a great example of that 60s mentality. There's a 60s liberalism
60s,
that would
yeah.
not work today.
Right,
the 60s
exactly.
white liberalism is the people who retain that are considered bad people today because they cross the street when they see a black person and that type of stuff. But in their mind they're like, no, I want those people to go to college and stuff. I just don't want them to live next door.
Chekhov has a line, and he says, "Guess who's coming to dinner?" And that's the movie that's about
Sidney Poitier.
your daughter's dating a black guy.
And that what's important about that analogy, that line is, it's partly a throwaway joke line that people would recognize who are familiar with the movie. But the plot is specifically about a white woman who gets engaged to a black physician. And then they go to San Francisco to meet up with her parents. She's introducing her fiance to her parents. Her parents are liberal parents in that movie.
They live in San Francisco.
Yeah. And they're liberal, they're active liberals. And the whole point of the movie is that these active liberals who talk all this great stuff, when it comes down to their daughter marrying a black person, they are confronting their inbuilt racism. And that is an almost perfect analogy for what's happening here, which is we see Uhura and Chekhov and Scott. They all say racist shit when the dinner is over and they're sitting there. It's not as bad as those they stink so bad, but it's very close. It's that it's that upper class racism of like, we're liberal and we like everybody, except when we actually have to deal with them and eat food with them.
Yeah.
It's like, we got to eat with these people.
I wonder at what point you sort of, maybe forgive is not the correct word, but sort of, as long as you see someone, like, if they're trying. Now, there's no evidence that Chekhov was really trying in that instance, but at the same time, you don't really know.
I think it's that they don't.
They just don't think
it's like
about
you.
it.
It's precisely what you said.
Yeah.
It doesn't occur to them.
It doesn't occur to them that they should be trying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Again, because that's not how they've been programmed culturally. They've been programmed to think of these people. No matter what you deal with these people, it's going to be a bad scene. Best case scenario, you work it out and you don't have to actually get into any scrapes with them. You know.
When so that whole kind of exchange after the Hitler remark between Kirk and Chang, it reminded
You said
me
Hitler so aggressively.
Hitler remark.
Adolf Hitler.
That guy.
That
bad dude.
So after that, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the meeting of Sisko with Ducat the first time.
Yeah.
Except the Ducat-Sisko one was more tactical, and the one between Kirk and Chang was more like malicious and personal,
but with a weird, with like a weird tinge of like honor. Like, Chang. I think Chang was sincere all throughout the movie. I think Chang was sincere in the idea of like, it'd be better if we just fought each other.
Oh yeah, totally.
We would both be into that, right? Kirk, and the thing is Kirk would have been right into that.
But Kirk was, totally. But Chang was like resorting to some kind of he was using personal tactics where Ducat has been known to use a lot of personal tactics, but with Sisko at that one moment, there weren't any personal attacks going on.
They both knew the deal, and they were both talking around.
Yeah.
We know, I know that you know, and you know that I know, but we have to have this little dance.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was interesting. Like Chang, so we find out that, during when they're talking about Article 184, or whatever, and they're talking
187.
It was the what's that guy's name? It was in the
Which one are you talking about?
The scene where they were talking to the president for the first time.
Yeah, are you talking about the ambassadors? Who are you talking about?
Yeah, well, not the ambassador.
The Klingon ambassador? I did like the Klingon ambassador because another thing about this movie was the Klingon ambassador played a Klingon ambassador. He was all buffoonish and like over dramatic and aggressive, whereas the Romulan ambassador was sort of quiet and only kind of responded very cagily when asked a question.
Oh, and then there was fucking Sarek. Sarek was there.
Sarek's in there.
He
pops up. He's always popping up.
Being like kind of a bastard, but there's some logic and honor behind it, but he's still being a bastard somehow.
Sarek.
Somehow it's like, okay, Sarek, I guess you're right, but like, come on, man.
Come on, man.
Sarek is always like being like, I don't care if it's my son.
By the way, do not Google search "come on, man."
No, don't.
Just avoid that.
Unless you want to.
Well,
I'm not actually saying don't do that.
Comma.
That's really what I meant.
Put your comma in the proper.
We're all working from home right now. Be careful what you're searching for. And in the nighttime hours, when you're listening to the It's Got Star Trek podcast, it's late at night, and then you can search for "come on, guy" or all sorts of variations on that phrase.
Dan Glaubitz. Search for Dan Glaubitz.
Search for Dan. Dan, come on, guy.
Come on, Dan Glaubitz.
And if you don't find anything, put something there. Make it.
Just make it.
When you search for Dan Glaubitz, you
make a fake smoking gun.
You get pages of other people named Dan Glaubitz, and it's kind of hilarious when you. It's always funny.
These are the right Dan Glaubitz.
It's always funny when you search a friend's name, and most friends, even it's Google, so there's 7 point whatever billion people on the planet.
Because white people all have the same name.
Well, one of our friends, right? You search for his name, and it's some kind of sexual predator that comes up in the Google search.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, who's that?
It's our friend.
Oh shit.
Wait, are you friends with a sexual?
No, that person's name comes up as someone else's name. It's not him.
Oh, I wonder who it is.
Maybe his crime. Maybe our friends' like much more horrific crimes.
Yeah,
are buried as a result because of that.
That would be some coincidence, or maybe he planned it. The scene when they're talking about when they're talking Kurtwood Dad. When there's all the ambassadors in the room, so both Chang and was her name Azit Burr?
As it Burr.
They both want to kill Kirk, but for different reasons, we find out.
Yes.
They have totally different motives.
Yes.
Hers, and so at first you think like you're led to kind of, not that they're necessarily in it together, but they're both in on some treacherous plan together. But you find out really she's all about upholding the law, but she wants to she wants to avenge her father's death, basically. That's her motivation, which is fucked up, which isn't why you should want to do things. But so she was kind of, dicey in that area.
But she also wants to protect his legacy.
She wants to protect his legacy too, which you could say, I guess, is a political and
I think she believes
move
in it too.
Yeah,
I get the impression she always believed in it, so she didn't want to ruin his memory.
It's
by
kind of pushing the line, but if you take it along with Chang, you're kind of like, oh, that's fucked up. But then based upon the dinner and all the other stuff, Chang, he wants Kirk dead, but he wants to get him as a warrior, you know? But his motivations are something entirely separate altogether because he just doesn't think that shit should happen to begin with. It just so happens he wants to kill Kirk. Now, when he was the lawyer, played lawyer ball to get Kirk put on that undiscovered country, or not that, the literal undiscovered
He said the name of the movie.
The literal, I wasn't even talking about the figurative future. I was talking about the fucking dilithium mining planet.
You're repentant.
Isn't that kind of when I first as a kid saw ads for
what you
this?
think it is.
You think of the undiscovered country is this?
It's like they go to this planet. It's an undiscovered planet.
I thought this was why all these people in this undiscovered country? What the fuck is up with this?
City planning is terrible.
He's got his nuts on his knees.
Yeah, right. They're all glowing red. And they should have blurred it out because you could see his genitals.
And that's right. And they made some like when that scene's great. But when after Kirk kicks him in the knee balls and then Kirk is like trying to he's like getting out of there. It makes him like Jurassic Parky sounding like and weirdly. So I really love the music in this movie.
Yeah.
And I had the soundtrack, and I used when I was a kid, young person. I would listen to it to go to sleep and stuff. Really interesting soundtrack. We can talk a little bit more about that later if you'd like. But the thing is that there's in the music there's cues that sound like John Williams almost lifted them for the Jurassic Park.
Well, there's also
there's some some stuff like that.
I was also thinking speaking of those guys, Danny Elfman. I heard
Batman.
I heard some Batman. Yes, specifically
1989 Batman.
That's what Natalie said. She
said,
like,
in the opening music. Yeah, the opening. Exactly. Sounds like Batman.
I think Cliff Edelman, who did the soundtrack, I think he lifted some themes from Batman and Batman Returns, and then I'm not going to accuse John Williams of lifting them, but there's stuff in here. There's some beat stuff
John
that
Williams
sounds very similar to
whole
Jurassic Park.
I think this is like, I've talked about this before. There's a certain sort of what's in vogue for soundtrack music, especially with movies.
Yeah.
And or nowadays it's TV, but like, there's a composer that writes some hit shit, and so like for a couple of years after that, you have stuff that is stylistically similar. You see a lot of that now, maybe, or you did with the like Game of Thrones guy, like
Ramon Djawadi.
Yeah, Ramon Djawadi. He's getting lots of gigs making music for stuff, but like his style is sort of also, like the style of like what you want.
Yeah, I was thinking about like video games actually went through a music thing too for like all the 8-bit music, and then when they moved to CDs, they were like, we don't need to dick around with this bullshit 8-bit shit music. We can make all these crazy techno songs and stuff like this. And then now we're in the future and we're getting a throwback. It's like we missed that. It's like we know what these fucking songs sound like. It's cool. It works for something, but we miss the art form of like composing for a video game as opposed to grabbing things to throw on a video game. And it works sometimes putting DJ mixes or whatever, but it's just like they totally embraced that whole thing and didn't look back. And it's just kind of like you were saying about like trends, how they sort of, because something's in vogue, everyone has to jump on that train.
Well, and one brilliant use of the music, I mean, I liked it throughout, but, and we didn't talk about this, but the opening scene I think is one of the best in Star Trek, and it's a peculiar one because the music comes up very very slowly. The starfield is moving towards you, and the music just keeps going and going and going and building and getting more exciting, and it's ebbing and flowing in this way that makes you uncomfortable almost. You're like, what's going to go? It's sort of sinister and stuff, and the credits keep going, and at one point it dies down a little. You're like, okay, the credits are about to end, and then nope, it comes back, and then the music comes back, and the credits keep going, and then boom, Praxis explodes, right? And it's this big, like, it's drawing it out. I think the kids call it edging these days. If Reddit,
I think it's called docking.
no, docking is the foreskin penis into the foreskin. Edging is when you prevent yourself from having orgasm for a long period of time until
That's hard to do.
yeah, and then at some point you let yourself, and then all sorts of stuff goes crazy.
I like that this podcast is really educational.
It is edging. Look it up.
You don't have to look it up.
But you can if you like.
You can-
look
yeah,
at
do what you
come
want.
on guy edging. Come
Do
on
what the
guy.
fuck you want. I don't care.
But quite seriously, folks, I do think that from and perhaps this is a vague memory I have from the theater of this excitement in that we're not seeing action, we're just seeing Starfield and names on the screen, and then all of a sudden this fucking explosion, which by the way at the time apparently was some groundbreaking digital algorithm stuff that they still use some of those they use versions of those original algorithms, and it's still called the Praxis effect. Because I think it was ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, who did the special effects for this movie. And that kind of donut explosion, which we've seen a billion times since, but this is kind of like the first time they managed that.
They also used on a tangent. They also for the Klingon blood, which when it lost gravity, like I said, it looks like pink bismuth. That's basically I think what they used.
Pink business.
You mean Pepto-Bismol?
Well, you call it
Peppy Bismilk?
call it what you want.
Pink business.
Pink bismuth.
Bismuth.
Yes.
Business. Are you
Is
trying
that
to say?
is that
Are
the
you trying to
generic
say
term?
business?
No, I'm saying bismuth. I'm not. I don't have like some kind of Spanish lisp.
Ipswich.
Latino. Welcome to all our Latino listeners. By the way,
Spanish. I
apparently.
was saying Spanish, not. I wasn't saying. I was saying
Yeah,
from
but
Spain.
you reminded me
Spanish
of
business.
Latino.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Latinx people.
I'm sorry.
That's like Spain.
We are pro
It's like a
Latino people.
Catalonian type of.
Buenos
Yeah.
dias.
Barcelona. Do they say Barth? Yeah, Barcelona. Is
Yeah.
in
Barcelona, they say
Catalan.
Barcelona. Everywhere else,
Catalan.
they say Barcelona.
Ba.
I come from
You
Barcelona.
have a cousin from that part of the world.
Yeah,
I learn English.
I do.
I can speak English. I learn it from a book.
From my book.
Faulty Towers.
So what I was saying, yeah, Faulty Towers. It's with John Cleese.
It's a reference. I'm not being inappropriate or unwoke. That's a quote from Faulty Towers.
I think that.
Faulty Towers might have been racist.
Yeah,
It
with their
was.
special
We'll allow for
their
that.
helper, with their helper.
Yeah, Manuel. That was a
rather
quote from
was.
Manuel.
Yeah, was
And that
not
old
woke.
major guy, he says some.
Oh, the major
He says
is
some
straight up, but
stuff.
he's supposed to be racist.
I like that guy who's all like asking for what is a Waldorf salad.
Yeah.
I mean, he's supposed to be the loud American.
like we're fresh out of Waldorf.
I'll kick your ass, kick your ass.
That guy was in Full Metal Jacket.
He's actually Canadian.
and he was in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah,
that actor.
he
So
was.
Everyone go watch all of Faulty Towers. We have a lot of recommendations this
You
week.
can watch it in a day.
You can watch it.
I watched
at
it
the Bay
in a day.
You can watch it
Don't
without my
mention
say.
the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it.
You can watch it while you lay. So what I was getting at is the pink bismuth blood. When it was in no gravity land, that looked like the special effects from The Abyss and subsequently
Yeah,
Terminator 2.
yeah.
That kind, because that was groundbreaking. Abyss was 1989, and when The Abyss which was also
The water
Terminator,
tentacle.
Terminator, and which Terminator 2 with the T1
T2.
T2 the T1000.
That was 1992, right?
I don't know, but that was a direct. Was it? It probably.
I believe it was.
But that was
Yeah,
drawn.
it
That was
was.
said to draw by the same directly from the Abyss. I think it was the same people did it or something. But that effect of like
It's
that metallic
exactly the same,
but metallic
yeah.
squishiness. That's what the Star Trek kind of reminded me of at that point.
And
too.
I don't know if this is true. I recall reading at some point that originally the blood was red, but that in order to get the rating they wanted or to make the studio happy or something,
those motherfuckers.
because it is pretty violent. I mean, it is like
They shoot some guy's arm off.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost like, why didn't they do it? It's weird. It's a little bit weird, but it's cool. I think that whole scene where the assassination goes down is really, really fucking intense and clever. And Kirk is fucking tired as balls. I was reminded on this watch, I don't know if I really noticed it before, that this watch, that Kirk is desperate to go to sleep, and then Spock calls him up to the bridge to talk about the neutrino stuff.
That hurt me.
Yeah,
When I was like, oh, he's getting to lay down, he's been drinking, he had a bad night,
Yeah.
he's probably feeling shitty, he wants to go to bed, and immediately gets back. It's like, I felt that.
He's
I
got
felt
like
that pain.
his thing like all unpinned.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's supposed to be relaxing.
And you're like, yeah.
Because the rest of the uniform is still around your neck. Nothing changes. They just
He comes
unbutton
back to the
front part.
bridge and it's all unpinned. He's just like,
That means they're relaxing.
And then
Kinda
he goes
hungover.
to the bridge, and then that's when all the shit goes down. That's when the torpedo gets
Romulan
fired, and so he basically never has a good night's sleep from that
Yeah.
point onward.
Oh, my
so,
God.
So it accentuates what he's going through. I mean, McCoy maybe didn't get any sleep, but he was going to go drink
only
some
ti-
coffee.
The only time he really went to sleep was when they were in the undiscovered. Sorry. That brings me. I never finished my other point, by the way.
All right.
The mining colony. Okay.
yeah.
I just really want to finish this point up. Another point interrupted.
He's finishing a point that takes place later in the
Within
in the events.
another point.
Well, I was talking about back at when they were talking about intergalactic law, where the President Kurtwood was in this room with the ambassadors, and they said that's when we find out that
President Kurtwood.
yeah, that was that when we
Knock
find
you
out
on your ass.
when they find out that the what's her name Barat knew as it Burr.
Now who's tickling the grayscale?
Oh man, I guess I'm me.
Zetbur.
As Zetbor, we find out that her motivations are different from Chang's. And what I was saying is Chang wants to kill him as a warrior, not as vengeance, but just because it's fun. Plus, he
Yeah,
also has a whole subplot he's going through. But then he becomes the lawyer somehow in that courtroom situation, and he lawyers Kirk to death, basically.
Yeah, he does a good job of
Do you
it.
think he felt like a warrior's victory from that? Or do you think,
I think he would have if they had been sentenced to death. He was surprised that they were not sentenced
and that was
to
bummed
death.
out. But then he had to resort to assassination, which is not the way of the. Well, I don't know.
Well,
way
so
of
the
warrior.
assassination was involved in the plots regardless, but this was a
the assassination-
Romulans and Federation
No,
were
but I'm
also-
talking about the assassination of Kirk is what I meant. Kirk,
Yeah.
that only happened because they got sent to the mining colony.
Yes, but you could argue that it might not have even been just him involved. Obviously, he's working with the Romulans and the Federation people. But I think you pose a good question. One reason is that one thing I was thinking was that when you look at after Kirk and McCoy beam over to the ship and they try to save Gorkin and they fail, and then when Chang just says, okay, under Article whatever 143 of your intergalactic
it's
law,
184
of your intergalactic law, I'm forced to place you under arrest. He could have read that. He could have done that, portrayed that line in a much more aggressive, like, ha ha ha, fuck you.
Yeah.
He seemed disappointed.
Yeah.
He seemed frustrated that's his whole plan was to use the excuse of the assassination to attack the Enterprise. And he didn't get to do that.
So, and then though, in the final battle, you could on the one hand say, well, he got what he wanted. He died as a warrior or whatever. But how, is it cool with Klingons? I mean, Klingons are down with stealth technology, but are they cool with hiding from your enemy and sort of sniping them, camping out and slipping around them and sniping them?
I think the caveat here is because I think the point you're making is excellent, but even though he was hiding the ship, he wasn't hiding that they were there. He was taunting Kirk.
Yeah, he was taunting him.
I think that's the Romulan would have been completely silent and just sneaking around and doing horrible shit. He was having a fucking great ass time talking, cry havoc and let's slip the dogs of
Klingon
war.
wants you to know that they're there. The Klingons want you to know that they're there.
So ultimately, Chang probably got
He got what he wanted.
Well,
He did not have to survive in the post-peace landscape.
and he died as like a Klingon warrior. He didn't play some.
Yeah.
He had some good times. Kirk's thinking fast, man. I mean, not only back at Sulu. So I guess they were going on their 3-year
Fly her apart then.
Their 3-year mission was
One of my favorite lines in the whole movie.
where?
Sorry. It's just later when Sulu is trying to get to Camp Kittimer in time to help out.
I
And
remember
there's
that,
like, she'll fly apart. So he's like, fly her apart then. That was so excellent.
I love when Chang like starts freaking out at Kirk at the end of the trial. He starts don't say that, don't
Wait for the translation.
Yeah.
That's directly from the interaction. That's lifted word for word from I believe it was a UN interaction with the Soviets. Like the Soviet ambassador and stuff. And there's like between the American and the Soviet, and they're yelling at each other. And they're all like, "Don't wait for the translation." Blah blah blah.
Do you deny you were demoted with these charges, Captain? Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now. Your honors, please. That was Worf Granddad. Your honors, please. I am not effective at all.
So it was a show trial.
Yeah, it was
a fucking kick-ass trial.
It was awesome.
That courtroom. I mean, I'm all for justice reform, but honestly, I could, I don't necessarily want this justice system, but I do want those courtrooms.
Dude, that fucking multi-tiered
The
Coliseum.
ceilings, man.
The ceilings. Yeah, how do you paint those and dust those and do all the things? Those ceilings.
You got robots.
I mean, you basically have a Coliseum that's who knows how tall. They've got those awesome glowing red spear thingies. You got old man whoever Klingon dude behind with a metal hand and a sparky fucking
that
ball.
shit fucking ruled,
That
man.
was the coolest.
Even if they just did that in courtrooms, just gave judges instead of a gavel, just like a big ball that makes sparks.
Yeah. And of course, and he's just perfectly in the shadows the whole time. Yeah. And then they had some
He's
cauldron.
got like a weird monster voice.
Yeah. They had some cauldron of fire. A cauldron of fire on the door leading in. It's like someone's got to light that.
That's proper fucking Klingon.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of lighting, the movie I thought was really lit very well, very atmospheric, more in the style of TOS, but without the sort of gaudiness and campiness,
But
very like shadows and like when Kirk is confused and stuff at the early and filled with hate at the beginning, he's like draped in a shadow from the grate, and stuff. So he's like in a cage of shadow, very, very visually evocative.
So this is 1991, and it's interesting because they've got the Atari screens or whatever. It almost harkens. I don't know if I've earned the right to use that word, but
let's find out.
Back to like late 70s, early 80s sci-fi in a way. It's not I'm saying 100%, but like what you were saying about the lighting, something, and I'm not talking about sex, space, rom-com, space adventures. I'm just talking about
we're in space having sex in 1970s.
Let's say just the vibe of. Like, okay, Atari screens on a 1991 movie, they could have like done something different than that, but they didn't, and I like the look of it.
But they also didn't have LCD screens, they didn't have flat panels, so they were going to use CRT screens. So a key thing with Nicholas Meyer, and this caused him a great deal of trouble.
Well, okay, the Enterprise D on TNG. Yeah. Enterprise D on TNG.
Yeah, those aren't flat panel screens. Those are just plastic.
No, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm just what I'm saying though is that those look more of.
Yeah, they could have done that.
They look more of your. That's more of your 80s, early 90s sensibility of the future. What they did.
Yeah, 100%
Star Trek
agree.
wasn't like early 90s sensibility.
It looked like
of the
Alien.
future. Yeah, and I think it looked better, and that goes the lighting. It just had that vibe of that whole time.
I think that all comes from Nicholas Meyer because one of the greatest problems that Gene Roddenberry had with Nicholas Meyer with Star Trek II is he didn't like how militaristic it was. That was the term he used, militaristic. Nicholas Meyer he might agree or he might put it a little differently. Nicholas Meyer just dove deeply into the naval aspect. He really almost like Star Trek was always a naval-ish show, but it was Star Trek II that pushed it into the straight up, like you said,
because that's
moorings.
like a submarine movie. Right?
It's a straight up fucking submarine movie, and they got the yeoman's whistle, and like the screens. And I think I mentioned earlier that I thought this was really like the best version of the Enterprise we've seen in that. It looks modern and futuristic, but it also looks lived in. The quarters look like they make sense. Like the captain's quarters is not some giant quarters.
Yeah.
You can tell it's bigger than the other people. They have all those guys in bunks, like when on the Excelsior, when that gets hit, like they fall out of their bunks.
Right before they find the dead guys with the bloody suit or whatever, I was actually noticing how there's pipes running along the ceiling of the hallways to give it that sort of more naval look and not kind of pristine look of like
you
TNG
see
or
more
something.
crew people, more enlisted people in this movie
with those
in
enlisted
TOS,
uniforms,
as opposed to TNG, where it looks like just everybody's an officer.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting with these space movies is they have to go the military route, obviously, with the naval stuff, but then you also have the strange combination of sort of the frontierism cowboy Western style. And some go for more of one thing than another, but they both have
some are more Firefly.
Yeah.
Some are more...
And they both make sense. It's
TNG's gone a few directions, or not TNG, Star Trek, right? Because the thing is it's partly so Star Trek II, they redesigned the ship, they redesigned the bridge and everything to make it look much more militaristic, much more naval. I know one complaint that people, and I think Roddenberry had at the time, was Nicholas Meyer put a no smoking sign on the bridge, and they were all like, nobody would be smoking in the future. Nicholas Meyer was like, what the fuck are you talking about? Those people are going to be smoking. like, yeah, maybe it's stupid to smoke, or maybe they invented like safety cigarette, but like, Come on, people.
She
are
was
probably-
smoking that cigar, or that alien assassin was smoking
Yeah,
that cigar. Martia.
Played by Imam.
Iman, yeah.
Iman.
David Bowie's widow.
Bowie's wife. Widow. Now widow, at the time wife.
She was smoking. Do you think that was normal space tobacco, or do you think it was space
Snake leaf.
weed?
That was some snake
That
leaf.
was totally some space leaf. She was a shapeshifter.
Apparently so, yeah.
And so,
Yeah, they popped up a few times.
But have they ever sort
But
of?
she couldn't escape from the planet.
Yeah, they had shapeshifters going back. I mean, it depends on what your definition of shapeshifter is, but if it's the basic definition of somebody who can appear as different people at will,
Yeah,
that's come up more than once
She's
before Odo.
she's a you knew where I was going with that.
Cameloid.
Which is chameleon.
Camel
Cameloid. And Odo was part of
She's
some
got
other
a
thing.
camel.
Odo was more of a goop monster.
He was a founder. Yeah, she doesn't seem to be a goop monster as far as we can tell.
We're talking about tobacco. They wouldn't have smoking tobacco in the future.
Smoking.
But yeah, starting in Star
they
Trek
just
2,
have eaten tobacco.
the Star Trek 2, they made that change to the more militaristic stuff. It continued into Star Trek 3. That Enterprise is destroyed. Star Trek 4 is all on the Klingon bird of prey that they stole. Star Trek 5...
Tack bag.
Star Trek 5...
Powerful week.
Which came out in 1989, as I recall. That... They decided TNG is popular and it's easier to reuse these sets and stuff. So Star Trek 5 on their new Enterprise, the Enterprise A, they made that TNG style. That had nice carpets and bright lighting and all that. And so what they've done in Star Trek 6 is they said, fuck, Nicholas Meyer was like, yeah, fuck all that. This is a military vessel, and I want to stress in this particular story that this is a military vessel because the whole plot of the movie hinges on this idea that these are military people trying to how are they going to deal with peace when everything around them
How are they going to deal with peas when they don't have the carrots?
Who are these peace people?
Gherkin. Kirkin for a gherkin. There was one bit of the most colorful it got is the couple shots when they were showing the whole ship like kicking in its warp engines. Mm-hmm. There was like 2 blue lines and a purple line, and that was cool because that was just campy enough, I thought, to be entertaining because they were like these kind of brightly kind of weird, like, I don't know, throwback kind of sort of vibe.
I really like the during the court scene when McCoy is talking about his health, having a touch of arthritis, otherwise he's okay. And that one Klingon is all like, he's like fucking laughing his ass off.
McCoy's all like,
and McCoy looks so fucking delighted.
It's just one guy. That was a strange choice on the part of the writers to, it works though. It was kind of funny. It's just gonna make one guy laughing hilariously.
But I think one last major point about the court scene that I think is useful to observe is that the judge made this decision to commute their sentence of death and send them to Ruapente. It appears by all evidence that is not what, as Burr expected, is not what Chang expected. They had looks of surprise, like Chang in particular. Yeah,
because
a look of surprise.
It seems like the Klingons mostly know what the outcome's going to be usually.
Yeah, it's a show trial, but I think it's important to note because it again provides nuance to the Klingons because Chang has this plan, but it doesn't work 100%. And none of the plans are working 100%, right? The original attack didn't work out exactly as they'd planned because Kirk and Spock got arrested. They didn't expect Kirk to surrender the fucking Enterprise. They didn't expect him to do that shit. They didn't expect him to beam over and try to help and then get arrested. And then it shows that there is agency, and this is not like some of those movies where you have this all-powerful villain who's manipulating everything, and then at the very last minute, the hero saved the day. The hero saved the day by dogged fucking deduction and finding evidence and using science, and the bad guys are adapting their plans as needed because they're adapting to the situation and they're making progress. It's just not exactly the way they wanted, so they have to keep shifting their plans a little,
Yeah, I was. That reminds me of how I was trying to say before, how Kirk really is pretty quick thinking here in this movie.
Quick on his feet. He doesn't believe in a no-win scenario.
So he was at the whole Kobe. He references the Kobayashi Maru for some reason, so one of those things was in the second battle, the final battle he had with Chang, when he sees the photon torpedo come out, and you can see Kirk all shaking, kind of like, go back. He's like telling him to put,
he's like, back up,
and it's like, huh? And then even Chang's like, what's going on?
What's happening?
He's like, he can't figure out what he's doing. It's a weird, strange maneuver, and as the audience, we don't really know what he was doing, except it's implied that he was trying to deduce where the shit was coming from and how that worked. So that was kind of interesting. But the one, to be able to have the wherewithal at the beginning to when the missile shot from that ship onto initially shot the Klingon ship, and like they were like powering up to fight Kirk.
Yeah.
The assumption was going to be that they were going to fight back. It's like, we have to fight. Yeah. We have no choice. But like Kirk thought like, okay, no, we're not going to do this. Like
that's not the mission.
That's not the mission. And so when you think about fight or flight, right? The one way you could interpret that, which I don't think is the way it is that was him saying flight. Oh, I don't want to fight. I'm scared. I'm running away. But no, that was that was a fight moment.
Because they could have run away.
Yeah.
The Klingon ship is fucked up momentarily. They could have just gone into warp and started running.
And I think a flight moment would have also been like if they attacked the ship, because it was a guaranteed victory, and that would have played into their hand. And so, but the fight moment was when he took that risk and was like, I'm going to this is a gambit. I'm going to see how this plays out, because this ultimately, I'm not going to get known for starting a fucking war. So that was a pretty quick way to think that through.
And a brilliant Kirk move, because Kirk, historically, his cleverness is, a lot of it is going against what people expect, even from him, not just what they would expect in that scenario, but what they would expect specifically from knowing him as a famous battle-hardened captain, right? Who has a lot of experience. He's able to subvert his own reputation in order to gain an advantage on his enemies.
And after Spock's all moping in that room at the end, after he finds out that Valeris is a turncoat and Kirk is in there, and they're both having their own sort of realizations, Kirk even says that Spock takes the more logical approach. And it's interesting because Kirk, he also says that he tends to jump into things. He's the more cavalier one of the two. But when it comes down to it, I mean, I don't know. Could you call Kirk emotional, or would you call Kirk? He's logical, he's cavalier, but he doesn't just jump into things without thought. You know,
even though that's what he thinks of himself that way, as he describes when he's in Spock's room. You know, we jump in. I jump into things where angels don't dare. We're both extremists.
Yeah,
the reality is probably somewhere in between.
Yeah,
that Kirk has been portrayed and written in different ways throughout shows and movies and things like that, but the fundamental idea has always been that the Kirk, Spock, McCoy triumvirate is Spock is the logical side, McCoy is the emotional side, and Kirk is sort of the conduit, the combination of the two. And I think that plays very nicely with Spock's line again about logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. And that's what he has learned in his lifetime arc with Kirk. That's what he's learned. That he learned that from Kirk. Right? He's saying it to Valeris. He's not attributing it to Kirk, but we know, or should know as the audience and as super excellent nerdy Star Trek fans, that that's really a lesson that he learned through his relationship and experiences with Kirk, because Kirk was able to use logic and reason, like in this scenario, you mapped it out very well. What are his choices? He saw a choice that other people may not have seen, not because he lacks logic, not because he is over-reliant on emotion, but because he can combine the two to understand that this peace mission is all about emotion, right? It's all about how are people going to react to the actions we take. So I have to go against all my instincts to take the action that is going to elicit the best response. And for example, with Azet Burr, she's got to be, even though she was all about like, my father's dead, I want somebody to pay for it, and it's going to be Kirk and McCoy, she has to be thinking, why did he surrender? They shot us. We were temporarily disabled. Yeah. They had no damage at all. And he surrendered. Why?
It's just not Klingon.
It plants a seed that then Kirk capitalizes on later, because when he saves the Federation president and then reveals what the plot was, that's why she's so quick to come around, I think, is because she wasn't even though she wanted to go to jail, she seems smart enough to realize and nuanced enough a character to realize, oh, new information. I have a new perspective on what happened. Now I understand. Now I can, in one moment, both forgive you and applaud you for the work you've done to help protect my father's legacy, which was my mission.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you can. So, right, that would help explain more her quick turn at the end, sort of, her sort of wondering why Kirk was going against all instincts and sort of forcing them to think, maybe there's more to this guy. It still seemed like, I guess they saved a bunch of people.
I mean, and she watched him, like, stop an assassination right there.
Yeah, I guess that's part of it. It was just kind of like his speech was, it was kind of like, what was it, Rocky 3? What was the one where he went to
Road?
Rocky 3 is he went, or Rocky 2? Which was the one where he went to Russia? It's
Rocky 4.
Is that Rocky 4? He's like, hey, we can change. You can change. We all can change. It was much more eloquent the way Kirk put it, I thought.
Yeah, yes, I do generally think William Shatner is more eloquent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But,
I think it's a great ending speech. I mean, it's the movie is very Star Trek.
Yeah, it's good.
It's a very Star Trek movie in that it's okay. I was thinking about this the other day, right? I really love The Expanse. I think you could argue in a lot of ways The Expanse as a television show is better than Picard, Discovery, and frankly, a lot of other stuff out there, just in terms of the tightness of the writing, the plotting, the tenseness. It sort of combines like that.
Plotting, not plodding.
Yes. It combines, it evolves what started on Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, which was a brilliant show, but was also fucking like, it just turned into like the, how am I going to feel shitty today?
Because the Expanse is really a wild show. There's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil it for Dan or for our listeners.
Yeah. I'm on episode 3. I'm starting to get into it.
But The Expanse is a show where you start watching it and you're like, okay, all right, well, this is interesting. And as you go along, you're like, oh, I'm really enjoying this. And then you hit the last episode of the first season, and you're like, what the fuck? Jesus, this show's amazing. And it kind of gets better from there. But here's the thing. Here's the difference, right? The difference is The Expanse is a brilliantly entertaining show. It's so well written, frequently well acted. The stories and the elements. There's some political stuff in there that's really interesting, and it's kind of harder sci-fi, relying more on normal physics. It all takes place in the solar system.
It's got Paolo Costanzo.
It's very hard sci-fi.
So it's got this vibe that's really fresh and new and really well executed. But it does not have, and nor should it. It's a different thing. It does not have what Star Trek can have. Star Trek can be more important than The Expanse, even when the stories are maybe not as well scripted or whatever, or just the plot's not as interesting. Because when done well, Star Trek gives these messages that are so broadly applicable to sort of thinking about the world and thinking about how we treat people and how we approach the universe and how we approach ourselves. There's not a lot of that happens in The Expanse. The Expanse has little moral tales here and there and has a lot of interesting stuff to say, but it's less about sort of the grand philosophical debates, and it's a little bit more about sort of the gritty, like the political, the real politic.
Right.
Like, this is how things would happen if this is the way the solar system was set
realistic
up.
And random. And
yeah, it's more like a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy or something, which are fascinating, brilliant, amazing stuff, but it's not Picard in the Inner Light. It's not, Kirk giving speeches about the Constitution and, stuff like that.
Yeah, when Kirk goes, let them die. And then, of course, and then this is just sort of in the similar sort of intensity when they finally get that shit loaded up in the torpedo bay, he's like, fire! And then
that's amazing. That
so whole scene is amazing.
Fire.
And then it's just this suspenseful sort of tense, like you kind of know what's going to happen, but you're waiting for it. Like you're waiting for the tidal wave to hit you, and it's all quiet. And like the way they show the shots of Chang standing up, and then the other Klingon helmsman sort of like looking over, and then it's just coming at him. He's like, all right, and there's something really amazing about how they cut that scene together. The whole thing is really intense. And then they just blow it away. And it kind of reminded me slightly strangely of in RoboCop when the ED-209 was trying to climb stairs and it kept tripping and it kept wincing and kind of falling. That's kind of when they were shooting at the...
It was all bouncing back and forth.
It was all bouncing, like when they were like, fire at the explosion or whatever, and they pounded it. It was just like,
and then we get to see that same explosion again in, I think it's in Generations. We see a Klingon bird of prey explode, and they just show that. And it's funny because the film grain and everything doesn't match up with the rest of the movie.
That's pretty awesome.
They show it at least once on, I forget if it's Deep Space Nine or one of the shows where it's like all of a sudden you just see that exploding thing. They keep reusing that asset.
Speaking of shots, so that scene where they were on the mining place.
Give it a shot.
That was
Do I stab her in the chest 3 times?
You only got to stab her in the chest 3
Pulp
times.
Fiction. Pulp Fiction.
They were
reference to Pulp Fiction.
They were in Alaska. That was filmed in Alaska. In fact,
is that where that was filmed?
It was in
they did.
in the Chugach State Park. In Valdez, Cordova census area. What? I don't know. Apparently, there's
they don't have counties in Alaska.
It's Chugach. Sounds like Klingon to me. Chugach State Park.
It does.
But that was filmed. But
they appear to have pretty sunrises.
But back before they had drones to do those kinds of shots, they
helicopter shot.
They had to do a helicopter shot. And there was probably not any stock footage. It's funny when movies have stock footage. Yeah, it happens a lot. There was one movie with Jason Statham called like Crank or something where he has to keep his heart rate at a certain rate. It's fun. It's silly, but it's fun. But there's some scenes where you see an overhead sort of map satellite image. of
they're
the
just
shit.
using like Google Maps.
Yeah, it says in the corner Google Maps. It's amazing. They just don't care. They're like, it doesn't matter, But
so all right, so we're gonna we don't want to go on too long here.
I had a quick trivia game I wanted to play.
All right, you want to save that to the end?
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know that
this is the end.
I think the main thing, I think we've covered most. I mean, honestly, when I was watching this movie and when I was watching it the second time and taking notes, I was like, Jesus, we could do like a podcast just on Chang, podcast just on
the court scene was amazing. How they took McCoy's actions. It's like he made him feel guilty for helping him by calling him incompetent. But then again, if he didn't help him, he'd be like, "What? You wanted him to die by now?" They could have done either. They were saying something about evidence being circumstantial. Oh yeah, it was Starfleet officers and Worf Granddad was like, well, that evidence is circumstantial because they were just wearing Starfleet uniform. What he said is like they could have just been wearing Starfleet uniforms, and they were like, that's what's it called when something's not factual but you're predicting it? You're saying
speculative.
Thank you for words. Thank you for words.
Escort.
This guy was an English major.
But they were calling Worf saying that's speculative that they were someone else in the Starfleet uniform. Well, it's speculative from the start to assume that somebody wearing a Starfleet is going to be Starfleet. So
anyway. and then that scene, even though I know it's recorded earlier, it's emphasized here is when they play the tapes of Kirk's personal log. It really struck me how poetic it was. Read like poetry. His line, "I never trusted Klingons, and I never will. I've never been able to forgive them for the death of my boy." I mean, that's what you learn in creative writing. Like the meter and everything is, and what's brilliant about that. In addition to it works with Shatner's voice, of course, and I'm sure a lot of that was brought by him. But I have to imagine they know who they're writing for. They must have written it for Shatner to read it this way because it just works too perfectly. And we hear it at the beginning, and then they play it twice here. And I think that the way it's written is so catchy in your mind that it's meant to really get into the audience's mind to be like, don't forget, Kirk did say this.
Yeah.
He did say, we know he's not guilty of what they're charging him with, but he's not innocent of the thoughts. He's not innocent of the thinking that could lead to these types of actions. So even though, yes, this is a show trial, it's not implausible from the Klingon perspective, especially after hearing that he could be thinking in that direction.
When he heard that in the trial, he could have only thought that, she must have been recorded.
He knew at that point. And I actually think...
And then she was saying that Spock knew or something.
I think Spock... So there's a few schools of thought on this. Some people say Spock only found out that it was Valeris when... Because what happened is when they beam Kirk back up, Kirk says, "Can I talk to you about something?" And then they kind of go in the background.
Yeah, that's right.
And then Spock says, "It's possible." Like that's very overtly, we know for sure at that point, they've already decided it's Valeris. And Kirk has explained why. I think Spock is suspicious of Valeris before when Kirk leaves, when Kirk leaves, he gets arrested, and then Spock says, we'll be able to track the captain's movements. And Valeris says, how did you accomplish this? Spock gives her a look. He says, time is of the essence. We've got to keep moving.
Yeah, that seems like at the time, it's like, oh, you don't have time to explain that.
I think he was suspicious at that moment. How long does it take to say, I put a Valerian patch or whatever it was? I forget what the term was. They use it, by the way. They use that again. Was it in Picard they use that?
Valerian patch?
Not Valerian. It's not Valerian because I'm thinking Valeris. It's going to...
Valerian steel.
Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, I know, right?
Wait, what are you talking about?
Spock puts that patch on Kirk.
Oh,
that's how they're able to track him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay.
He later explains that.
Yeah,
he explains that, but he could have said that same sentence. It would have taken him less time than to tell her we have too much time. I think he's already suspicious at that point. Her asking the question, how did you accomplish this? I think has already made him somewhat suspicious because he knows there's something going on here, and he knows it's planned by somebody smart, it seems, because it's a pretty fucking clever ass plan, right? It took him a lot of work to even suss out exactly what happened, right? But I think that's a good transition into, I think the last real big thing we need to talk about is the Spock mind rape scene, because it plays interestingly. I'm sure it played interestingly at the time. It maybe has a different flavor now. It's an overt assault, and they direct it as an assault. They don't direct it as completely sympathetic to Spock. He looks troubled. He looks upset. She looks fucking upset. She acts like she's straight up being...
She gets really upset.
And first of all, it wasn't really necessary because after he couldn't get the information from her, he's like, okay, well, let's just call up Sulu. He'll give us this.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
Like, he'll just give this to it. But even so, ignoring that,
it did confirm at least, Admiral Cartwright and General Chang, their involvement.
It definitely did confirm that. Yeah, right.
So mildly helpful.
But I mean, regardless,
it wasn't useless. But you're right. Like maybe they could have figured that shit out. Elsewise.
No, that part was definitely not useless. It was just that one question. But aside from that, she was not enjoying that. So was that supposed to represent him digging deep, or was he like
that was him digging deep?
Or do you think he was using?
Digging.
Do you think he was pissed off too and was like
he was checking out her Unity?
Do you think he was trying to like be a little bit of an asshole about it?
It's I hadn't really considered that until you mentioned that idea, and I think there was a certain frustration, maybe an expression of frustration on the same time as he's justifying it to himself. And I think that's a very long debate that would take a whole nother podcast that maybe we'll do sometimes, talking about mental intrusions with the Beta Zeds and the Vulcans and others. But he's justifying it as they need to save the conference, right? They need to save the peace deal. Okay, right? But that's getting back to being utilitarian, right? When I was watching that, and I'm all thinking about like, oh, look, Valeris is all utilitarian. Spock has grown and learned that he's not. This is an interesting, weird little twist because now he's doing an ends justified the means type thing. The end is to save the peace thing, and he is abrogating her physical and mental space. I mean, it is. It's not a joke to use the term rape. I mean, he is invading her fucking mind in a way that is clearly affecting her mentally and physically. It's anguishing her, right? And now he is upset about it. He's not some like cool, he's not all Vulcan about it. He's not all like, this was the logical. He looks fucking, he barely can talk afterwards, but he still does it, right? And so you could argue in some ways that undercuts somewhat some of his growth, and maybe it would have been wiser to find a different, more Star Trek-y solution to getting the information from her, or finding the information an alternate way. Like you said, by calling up Sulu.
Yeah, she was definitely not the most logical Vulcan. So, okay, this might be irrelevant, but I remember at the beginning she made some comment when she was standing in the doorway and she recorded him doing that. We didn't know that. She recorded him saying he doesn't trust Klingons. And then he was basically, he didn't know, whatever. He goes to her, he says, you piloted well. And she goes, I always wanted to try that. And that combined with she always gave little smug, happy, self-satisfied like looks when she did stuff. How can you always, Vulcans are like...
Yeah, Vulcans are full of shit. They've always been full of shit.
But it was funny. What was the line when they come in and
They wouldn't let you get past warp 5.
they,
Yeah, I
oh my
know,
gosh,
it's funny.
yeah, that was a dick move of them. They did
was a
it.
dick
Pretty much, yeah.
When Kirk came in and met Valeris, what did he say? Something like, "You must be very proud," and she was said, "This was pretty Vulcan." She's like, "No, I don't believe so."
Yeah, I don't believe so.
Yeah.
A few little Easter eggs. First of all, him doing that, ordering her to go out of space dock so fast. That I believe that's a callback to Star Trek II with Saavik when Spock has Saavik do a similar thing, and it makes Kirk all nervous on the original Enterprise because he's all like, "What the fuck, Spock? You're having your fucking cadet? I know this isn't my ship anymore, but you're pissing me off because like your cadet's just gonna like fly this out." So that's a callback to that. And then the other thing to what I think might play into the characterization a little bit, but I don't really remember the order of events here. I know at one point, okay, there's two step process here. First step, originally they wanted to have this character be Saavik, right? They wanted it to be the fourth appearance of Saavik. Robin Curtis, who played Saavik, I believe she wanted more money than they were offering and was refusing to redo the role. And B, I think she didn't really want to play Saavik as the turncoat. The original idea is similar to Admiral Cartwright. Saavik is somebody who's on our side and we're on her side. And to have her become an antagonist is a realistic thing. It's a dramatic thing to happen. And I can appreciate where they were trying to go with that. However, it didn't work out. And then instead of recasting the character for a third time or a second time, I guess, recast, because Kirstie Alley played her first, then Robin Curtis played her in 3 and 4. They decided to create this new character. Now, my understanding is that at one point or another, the idea was that this character was going to be a half Romulan, half Vulcan. Possibly full Romulan, but I believe it was half Romulan, half Vulcan, similar to Commodore O, right? On Picard, right? So the idea is that I don't know if that's how she played it, and then they cut that out of the final movie. They just decided that the story worked better if she was full Vulcan, which I think it does, by the way, because I think the original idea is she's half Romulan, so that's why it turns out that she's all sneaky. I think it's better if the person who turns out all sneaky is not like from a sneaky culture. Well, I guess Vulcans are sneaky, but you know what I mean. They're not from an enemy culture, so there's not that extra thing going on.
And you can show that the logic is not necessarily based. I mean, it shows how logic, once again, can be flawed. I mean, she conspires with the Klingons to assassinate the Klingon Chancellor to prevent an alliance because she doesn't trust the Klingons that won't betray the Federation. She won't trust that they won't betray the Federation. So it's like she conspires with Klingons because she doesn't trust the Klingons, and then she uses the example of her conspiracy with the Klingons to point out that they can't be trusted.
Yeah, I know, it's a circular logic,
right?
I think
it doesn't seem logical, but I can see she's grasping at straws to try to win an argument.
Yes,
but like
through logic,
she would have done it anyways, whether the Klingons conspired with her or not. She would have done it anyways. And it just demonstrates that she's no more trustworthy than the Klingons that she mistrusts to begin with. So that's not 100%. Logical.
Yeah. And to break down their motivations a bit, I think you really have to parse out what's going on. They mentioned it a little bit more clearly at the beginning of the movie, but it's in all the back and forth discussion, especially during that original, that conference in Starfleet headquarters with the CNC, the Commander-in-Chief.
Commander-in-Chief. I hear he's got a music factory.
Whoa, Oak.
Early of 90s.
So
remember Freedom Williams?
The situation is
that like Everybody Dance now?
Yeah.
Everybody
and it's like, you want this party started right?
Nope.
You want this party started quickly. That was their other B-side hit.
So
I don't know if it was literally on the B-side.
Next week we'll have Dan sing some Sugar Hill Gang.
Oh, that's awesome.
I would actually be down for that. But anyway, so the original motivations are the original scenario is this. Klingon atmosphere is all fucked up because of Praxis exploded. Praxis exploding limits their energy production. They have 50 years of air left, right? So we're in this, the political situation is as follows. Some people in the Klingon high command, including the Chancellor, are like, literally the only thing we can do is sue for peace. Because we're fucked, right? We know we're fucked in X amount of time. Maybe we can stretch it a little with some technological advancements or whatever. But basically, the way we've been doing things now, like, we can't do that anymore. Because even to save our planet, even if we wanted no help from anybody to save our planet, we've got to cut back on all this military shit. But if we cut back on our military shit without making peace, then we're fucked because our military is what is keeping the peace right now, the Cold War going, right?
Yeah.
So that's the people who are like, we have to make peace in order to fix our planet, right? And survive. The other factions in the Klingon Empire are, we don't give a fuck. They're like climate change deniers. They're like, we don't want to fucking change what we're doing. We don't believe you. We think you're being alarmist. We think we can fight our way out of this. Now on the Federation side, those motherfuckers are like, those Klingons are weak now, and they've been this big problem. We're not gonna. They're not talking about genociding the Klingons. They're talking about going in and fucking them up to the point where they are no longer a threat and have like Starfleet bases all around. Who knows? Maybe even occupy Kronos, right? So that their whole philosophy is like, we got to strike now. Making peace will give them time to rebuild their economy, and then they'll just be a threat at some point in the future. So Valeris, from the Federation perspective, she doesn't give a fuck whether the Klingons help her or not, but it's more helpful if they do, right? It makes her job easier. And if she has allies, they're like, yeah, we think we can beat you by fighting you. And she, in her mind, is like, no, you can't fucking do that. If you want to be chumps and team up with us, they all think they're chumps. They all think the other people that they're allying with are chumps, right? But it's all, again, about the perspective of they want to save their shit.
Well, Chang is of the perspective of like, he's got like the old school Klingon kind of like die in battle regardless who gives a fuck. Don't even try to just like,
if our whole race dies, then a whole race dies.
Yeah. So once again, he got what he wanted. And so I don't know that he was willing to bring down the entire Klingon Empire simply because he wasn't. So. Yeah, because like you said, the smart thing that they were trying to do is they can't just build up their military because they have a weak military, and they need to make political, sort of alliances or whatever, so they can have like some breathing room and stuff. And he didn't give a shit about that breathing room at all. He was just like, let's fucking balls out, Well, and he got what he wanted in the end anyway.
If you take the breathing room comment from the dinner more literally, or like very literally, it could mean that what his thinking was that fuck Kronos. What we need to do is go on the fucking offensive and get more territory that we can keep expand the Klingon Empire so that we can have a buffer zone, and have room for our people, because that was the whole Hitler thing. It was like, oh, we need room.
That's what really they were about.
Yeah, we need territory and resources.
Living space.
Yeah, the resources and territory to put people there and build factories and be a strong country, right? In this case, a strong empire. So anyway,
did you see the part where Spock was we were talking about he's sort of accepting, he was accepting his human roots a little more emotional. When he saw Valeris, he said, it's agreeable to see you again.
Yeah. And
all I could think about at that moment is Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He would have said that was some hardcore flirting. He was Spock flirting with her, but he wasn't.
He wasn't, but
it's agreeable to see you again.
It's an interesting thing. I don't think there's any romance there, but there's a hint of something. Agreeable.
How can you want anything without emotion? I don't know.
Before we get to Dan's quiz thing, a couple fun quotes. I really liked Spock's "I've been dead before."
Yeah.
Great line.
Yeah, it was good.
Great line in there. I like the co-ed sleeping dorms. Mm-hmm. We've totally skipped over most of the Rua Penthe stuff. I don't think there's like too much to describe there. We talked about the balls on knees, alien.
It's kind of silly.
The Kirk on Kirk fight.
Yeah, okay, that's the
awesome.
that's the only thing we didn't really talk about, because it was kind of strange because so why did the guy there was evil Kirk, right? Which was pretty hilarious because I bet you William Shatner loved doing that.
Of course.
Who wouldn't?
They even say it in the line, it's like it's your lifelong ambition.
Yeah, like your lifelong ambition
to make love to yourself.
To make love to yourself. Like, yeah, and that was awesome. It's totally
what is it with you anyway?
It was
another great line.
It was a total like dig at his whole ego, and it was that was awesome. He says, "Yeah, I can't believe I kissed you," which is strange that she could shift shapes, but her trachea always, or whatever causes your voice to be.
Yeah, I know. Like when she was that little girl.
Yeah, that was weird lip syncing with that. I don't know.
It was just. It was. I think it was weird because I think the little girl did it too well.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of. It was like Uncanny Valley.
I love how they showed the giant anklet that they had.
Yeah, she lifts through it.
All huge, but And then the imposter scene, the classic imposter scene of like, don't kill me, kill the other guy. I don't know how the alien decided which one to kill, and if he knew which one he was killing.
How the Klingon guard guy?
Oh, the Klingon guard. Yeah, Klingon guard guy. So number one, how did he know which one he was supposed to kill? Number two, why did he want to kill the assassin? I guess kill the.
He was going to kill her. He was going to kill her. He says at the end, he's like, well. And by the way, a little on the nose, the guy had a straight up Russian accent, that guard. He's like, well, since you're all going to die anyway, why don't I tell you?
Yeah, that was a total like.
He's one of those British guys that's in a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
He was told that was a total dig on like all the supervillains in like James Bond movies and stuff.
Yeah.
How they
Kirk's all pissed off when he gets beamed back.
Yeah.
Oh, but what I liked about that guy, okay, so the Rurapente, another really well directed movie.
But we don't know how he knew which to kill. That was
but
didn't make any sense.
No, it makes sense. A minute later, when he admits that he was going to kill them all anyway, so it didn't matter. He was stopping the thing, and then like he did, he was, since all three were going to die, he did not have to actually make that choice.
Well, then it was lucky.
Yeah, I think it was lucky, right? But what I was going to say, the Rurapente, it's really so brilliant how they shot when they're marching into Rurapente. It looks fucking cold and miserable. And then that little toady Klingon guy brings out a fucking box, and then that guy just stands up on the box and is all like, talking. And then he hops down off the box, and then the toady runs over and grabs the box. Those are subtle little things that make really impact how a scene like that comes across,
Yeah, like I was thinking about that guy they brought out who they were punishing some guy by throwing him out, and he died within like minutes.
Yeah,
and I was wondering, I was like, do they just keep guys around that are being punished and wait for new recruits to come in to send them out, or do they just kill that many people off?
I think both. Yeah. I think everyone knows that every time there's a new shipment of prisoners, one of us is going to get picked to get fucking dead. So mind that dilithium.
Yeah, it's a good point. But yeah, no, that guy was awesome. He all had like some like missing eye and the whole idea of like this total just snow-covered, nasty blizzard place, and in the middle of nothing. Siberia. In the middle of nothing, there's a fucking trap door that leads up to this giant mining city.
And all the snow falls into it.
Yeah, and it made me think, it's like, how did that begin? Well, it just began with some people, they were like, there's some dilithium here, let's start chipping away,
Yeah.
And it's like, and this whole underground, just this different environment. And when you get to the surface might as well be outer fucking space, man. I can't believe I added fucking in there.
Hey, fucking.
That was really cheesy.
Hey, not
really
work.
cheesy.
This podcast is labeled explicit.
Well, it's just like outer fucking space, man.
Oh, Jesus.
So, anyways, it created there was a lot
Do they have any trilithium mines, or is it just dilithium?
I don't know where they get trilithium from.
What do they do with trilithium that they can't with dilithium?
They shove it up their unity.
You got to stick it up there.
Stick it up there. So yeah, it was
tingles.
It was good world building. That's
the whole movie's great world building. Yeah, really good. All right, so I think we've discussed most of the things. Good ending. It's it really was. This is one of those. There's not a lot to compare it to, but this is a really great send off for this crew. And then they make that decision to do the signatures, of the cast. And some people, but I thought that's great. Give these people the credit for all the joy they've brought to us.
And they broke Starfleet rule by they just balled out with the Enterprise to go on a mission overnight. They're like, go till morning, who gives a shit?
And that's a line. Second star to the right and straight on till morning is from 1953 Peter Pan, Disney.
Yeah.
And it comes up in a lot of other.
Yeah.
It's another literary reference.
It's just funny that they just kind of took the ship, and the people back at the station are probably like, oh, those guys.
Oh, that rascally old Captain Kirk. Yeah. Oh, he's done it again.
Yeah, but it was appropriate.
On the CNC.
But it is touching, though, because it's that moment of that last, you really get a final closing sort of mission, and that whole time to just kind of contemplate everything by wandering around for a day or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I thought the ending was great, with the signatures, and just sort of, it was a great send-off.
The Enterprise effectively flying into the sunset, which is a touching thing, All right, so Dan, you said you had a quiz game for us to close down the television show. Not yet. We're looking at contracts, so we're kind of convert this into a television show on ABC during the day, during smack dab. But the content will not change.
So Mike,
if we make that deal, yeah. All right, so quiz.
So I don't have a name for this. I guess I'll just call it.
We'll help you come up with a name.
Star Trek: The Discovered Racism. Racism Trek. I don't know.
Woke Trek.
Woke Trek. Yeah, these are basically the lines from throughout the movie that were just totally racist, and you have to like try to guess who said it. It's very basic, very straightforward, simple trivia from the beginning of time.
Word up.
So, who said Klingons would become the alien trash of the galaxy?
Oh, was that Admiral Cartwright?
It was.
Aha!
It was. When he was talking about bringing them to their knees. Because
10 points.
They were talking about helping them, and they're like, let's bring them to their knees. If we let them wander around, they'll just be, street trash,
And
basically.
Again, Brock Peters.
That's pretty offensive.
Brock Peters.
Yeah.
The use of Brock Peters' character is not only referencing, his role in Star Trek 4. It is in a meta sense, playing with Brock Peters' most famous role in To Kill a Mockingbird, where he is the black man accused of rape, falsely accused of rape. And put on trial in this southern town, and Atticus Finch defends him. And it's a brilliant role. He does an unbelievable job. If you haven't seen that movie or haven't seen it in a while, 100% worth checking out.
Oh yeah.
But him being the racist, right?
Robert Duvall.
That's play, and there's a scene where
Robert Duvall's great.
Right, yeah, right, exactly. Boo Radley.
Is there an innocent, gentle old man, or just this really sinister kind of like motherfucker? I don't know.
So in the scene when the Kittimer conference is going on and the assassination's about to go down, they have Brock Peters, Admiral Cartwright, sitting there, and he's just fucking drenched in sweat.
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah,
and the
totally
thing is,
sweating.
His being drenched in sweat, of course, in this context, is to kind of show that he's nervous. He knows the plot. He's nervous about it happening and working out all this stuff. But it is also, I believe, a meta callback to Kill a Mockingbird, because in that he was also drenched in sweat. They all were, because they were in a courtroom in the middle of the fucking summer.
Yeah.
It's like 110 degrees in the south with no air conditioning, and he's just dripping sweat, and he's on fucking trial, and he knows he didn't rape this girl, and he knows that he's got a male white jury who's gonna probably gonna convict him.
That's how you
not to spoil the movie.
That's how you could shake me, is like just get a really hot room. I'll get so mad and just
all right, next line.
Oh yeah, and then the president had those weird space glasses. Those were weird. In the scene at the end, he had glasses, and then the next scene he didn't have the glasses. You just watch the end scene. Anyways,
he just needs them to read.
He just needs them to read.
They're just reading glasses.
Okay, they're animals. Don't believe them. Don't trust them.
Captain Kirk?
Yes. They are dying.
20 points.
Let them die.
Oh, that's Captain Kirk.
Yeah, that was that part of that scene. Actually,
no points.
Actually, you know what? But they're animals. Don't believe them. Don't trust them. That's actually 2 quotes. There was a little thing I think said in between, so it was a misleading one.
Ellipses.
Oh yeah, this is the part. You must be very proud. I don't believe so, sir. She's a Vulcan, all right.
Is that McCoy?
Oh, it's McCoy.
It's
McCoy. That's the more fun kind of
playful racism.
Classic McCoy
that's
line.
classic, playful, fun McCoy racism. Well, we all know. I was going to say I've never trusted Klingons, and I never will. We all know that's Kirk.
Because we remember.
This is one. This was referenced earlier in the episode. This episode, as opposed to the other one.
Last week's episode.
This is 2 people. They all look alike. What about that smell? Only top of the line models can even talk, and
you know what's fucked up? I'm so pissed that I can't remember their names, because I remember their names being goofy.
I don't even have their real names listed.
Oh, you don't? Because their names are like Jenkins and Dershowitz or something. I can't remember what it was.
Like it shows how hard I looked.
Mouskowitz and Geppetto.
Geppetto.
Might as well been Geppetto. It shows how hard I tried. I looked for all of a few seconds. I found Crewman 1 and Crewman 2.
Oh,
but I'm sure they had names.
Yeah, because on the uniforms they match up their names. They're all like, Scotty's all like he's all like pointing at their labels. He's like, these men belong to these uniforms. It's like, yeah, no shit. We can watch movies. We know the deal.
Did you see the way they eat?
Uhura.
Yes. Terrible table manners.
That was clearly Spock.
Yeah, that was Spock. Terrible table manners.
That's not how Spock talks.
No. Maybe it was someone else.
That's that other guy.
No.
Chekhov.
Yup. You gotta check that one off.
Yup.
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 Check that one off
Yeah.
the list.
Klingons cannot be trusted, sir.
That's Valeris.
That's Valeris. This is one of the more interesting ones. This is actually in the director's cut. I'll bet that Klingon bitch killed her father.
Oh, yeah. Was that Admiral Cartwright?
No.
Oh, no.
I'll bet that Klingon bitch killed her father. That's amazing. It's just like manages to be racist and sexist. I mean, we all know that like bitch can be an asexual term nowadays, but in that case, you knew it was like a.
Was it the CNC?
No, it wasn't the CNC. It was a more lovable character.
Scotty.
It was Scotty.
That's right. Now I remember. Yeah, that was kind of fucked up.
That was a fucked up line.
I bet that Klingon bitch.
I haven't seen the director's cut.
And that wasn't really fair of me. But I had to bring it up because it's just kind of like
that's like the most. That's kind of bad.
Yeah. So
He's Scottish.
Yeah. Well, that's fucking Scots, man. I'm not gonna go along that joke. I was gonna start joking. Those.
No, I'm kind of eager. Like what sort of racist tirade you were about to go? I think it's Scottish.
Something
people.
about kilts.
Those haggis eating bastards.
Yeah, right. That's not how I roll though. Then he
Highlander. I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess that's really it. The part that I should have played up that last one better. You should have. I did say that it was the more interesting one. But there's more.
Do you have any jokes?
There was more. I already gave the Gherkin one, but there was more after that line.
Was that the Kirkin Gherkin?
Kirkin
your Gherkin? Was that the joke? Kirkin your Gherkin?
I'm Kirkin for a Gherkin or a Kirkin your Gherkin?
He was kirking it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna Kirkin my Gherkin. Are you Kirkin my Gherkin?
Synthetic sympathizers or synthesizers. So after that, Scotty goes on to say, they don't place the same value on life that we do. Spock, you know that. Then he goes, take my word, she did not shed one bloody tear. And this is interesting because Spock logically points out, hardly conclusive, Mr. Scott, as Klingons have no tear ducts.
Yeah, I know,
which
right?
is not racist, but it's funny that they don't have tear ducts because
they don't cry because they're Klingons.
Yeah, because they're incapable of sadness. So it kind of like fits with Scotty's racist. The last thing I wanted to point out was the Christian Slater scene, which
I forgot about that.
What was the point of that whole scene? If there was,
just put him in there
because it makes me think there was more to that got cut that didn't even make it to the director's cut.
He was an up and coming guy at the time.
Yeah,
he begged to be in the movie.
Okay,
and I believe there was some hope that like he wanted to originally have like a bigger role or something, but he had other he couldn't get room in his schedule, so he couldn't do a bigger role. I don't know if he was going to play like Sulu's first officers. I have no idea.
And they were like, we're not going to give Christian Slater a big role.
But
yeah, that guy.
Well, don't forget
he was in The Wizard.
Don't forget Eddie Murphy was supposed to be in Star Trek 4. Star Trek 4 is originally conceived, and we'll talk about that one day too. Was all around Eddie Murphy.
But speaking of great lines, though, Sulu is
break your dick off.
Sulu goes, "You have hearing problems, mister."
Yeah, Sulu.
You have hearing problems, mister. I'm not trying to make that sound weird. I don't know.
Sulu makes a brilliant captain.
You have hearing problems, mister. It's just a funny thing to say to someone.
He's a great captain. The Excelsior is an awesome looking ship, but a lot of his crew members seem to be morons.
Yeah,
because he's always having to yell at them. Yeah. They're not listening to him.
Yeah,
fly her apart then.
Yeah,
like at the beginning when she's all like, "Do we report this?" And he's like, "What the fuck is your problem? Yeah. Of course we're gonna fucking report this." Oh yeah, and Yeoman Rand has gotten a promotion. Like, she was on the Excelsior. I believe it was the Excelsior, yeah, that she's in the background. She was on the TOS show.
It seemed like that whole Christian Slater scene was, I guess, to like have Christian Slater, but it was also just to kind of remind you that Sulu was still there. Sulu's going to do something. It's like it's like a part of the plot that's happening in the background, but just reminding you. You have to make an assumption that there's some shit Sulu knows in the background. It's kind of like a device to sort of get info. Like, for example, the location of whatever.
Location.
Just to keep him in the movie, too, I guess.
think the Enterprise B was an Excelsior class.
It was, yeah. It was a pretty cool one, too. All right, so let's close up shop. And
What is it with you anyway?
what we don't know is
I haven't figured that out yet.
we don't know what we're talking about next week. Should we figure that out now, or should we just say, look at the title and you'll figure it out?
It could be a surprise.
It could be a surprise. Yeah, next week you'll get some sort of surprise, right?
Wild card episode.
Wild card episode. We've got one or
Johnny
two,
Notes.
bank episodes. We can record new stuff. You'll see. We'll put it on Twitter. We'll put it on Instagram. We'll put it on Facebook. Let you know what we're going to be
Put it on, scram.
watching. What we'll be discussing. So we will fill you in.
But a big box of scram.
And we'll spend the next few days tickling the grayscale. And what was yours? Floop in the flop, Kirk in the blop.
Zibba the zoo.
Wiggling the waves.
Wiggling the waves. I thought it was blurring the waves.
No, that's blurring the lines, which is the real one.
Oh yeah, it was like wiggling the waves. Wasn't it? Is that what you said, Jesse?
Yeah.
I said that. It wasn't a thing.
That's what he does with his cock in the bathtub.
Oh wow, neat. That's exciting. I'd like to think about that a little more.
I bet you would.
What's this noise? This is related to Star Trek. What scene was that from?
Is that that's when the doors open?
No, that's a good guess though. That represents a failure on your failing as a son is my failure as a father.
Aw, that's touching.
Yeah. That was from Gladiator. No, that was the sound that the magnetic boots made. Which I first thought were suction boots because that's a suction noise.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is a suction noise.
But then how would they have suctioned onto the mesh? Well, they didn't because it was magnetic.
Those magnetic boots. All right, so
Magnets just go thunk.
you'll find
precisely.
out. You find kind, attractive listeners out there. You will find out by following us on Twitter at It's Got Star Trek, Instagram at It's Got Star Trek, Facebook at It's Got Star Trek. You can any of those. We'll keep you posted. You'll find out what we'll talk about next week, and it'll also be plainly apparent in the title of the episode. If you want to get us an email, I don't know if people do that anymore, but you can send us an email at feedback at itsgotstartrek.com.
Don't mistake it for anything else.
You can visit itsgotstartrek.com. We'll find out a way you can give us money. If you want to give us money,
Get gherkin.
it's funny. All right, so here's the deal.
You can download a 2.5-hour podcast.
We don't have a Patreon. Like, we probably should at some point, but we don't, we don't really think in these, ways. But we'll probably do a Patreon, do some t-shirts or some shit like that at some point.
Shit.
But the problem is,
Kirk and the gherkin.
the problem is, I know these are evergreen episodes. And
Oh
we'll
my
do-
God, that's so loud. Jesse's eating some pretzels.
Jesse's like, I'm going to get in the pretzels right now. This is exactly the time to get in the
I'm
pretzels.
sorry.
The show's almost over. But I'm just going to fucking dig into some crunchy ass fucking pretzels.
I'm gonna eat it off mic. That's not me. That's Dan. Dan's doing that.
Dan's performing the role of Jesse tonight will be played by Dan.
That was cute. That was fun.
Anyway, I don't even remember what I was talking about. Oh yeah,
You're
Patreon.
a cute, fun guy.
Yeah, so you can go to
You
our
are.
you can go to our website. We don't have any Patreon or anything like that, but it's kind of funny, right? That everyone else right now, because again, evergreen episodes, you're going to be listening to this 100 years from now, so you won't understand the context. But what's going on outside is the whole coronavirus thing. It's a super serious, sort of mortally terrifying thing we're going through right now.
COVID-19.
Yeah, the COVID-19
Super VGA.
stuff is going on, and so all the podcasts out there.
VGA.
Most of the podcasts are saying, a lot of the podcasts are saying, you know what? We love our Patreon subscribers, but we totally understand if you got to pull back, you got to take care of your family, you got to take care of yourself. We would apprite it if you could
Take
keep
a
going.
fucking shower,
but,
asshole.
But
Take care of yourself.
but
dry skin.
I think we're going to go the opposite way. I think we're going to during this crisis is precisely when we're going to start begging you guys for money. Buy our t-shirts. Anyway, we look forward to talking with you or talking at you next week about whatever it is the fuck we end up talking about.
And don't forget to leave reviews.
It'll be Star Trek.
If you can leave them on the iTunes one, because that's the way people like it the most. We don't
The world
agree
fucking
with
sucks.
We don't agree with that world that we live in that requires
the way
that.
it is.
But it's just the way it is.
Leave them reviews, rating and reviews.
I can either A, tell a joke, or B, not tell a joke that I was planning on telling.
Yeah.
As
Or
a reward.
he could provide some other clever anecdote. He's got loads of them.
I got him.
He's got loads of them all saved up.
He's got
Netter
Star
better.
Trek.
Yeah.
I've got Star Trek.
That's pretty good. All right. Thank you and good evening.
Is it possible that we two, you and I, have grown so old and so inflexible that we have outlived our usefulness? Would that constitute a joke?
Don't crucify yourself. It wasn't your fault.
I was responsible.
For no actions but your own.
That is not what you said at your trial.
That was as captain of the ship. Human beings.
But, Captain, we both know that I am not human.
Spock, you want to know something? Everybody's human.
I find that remark insulting.
Come on, I need you.